Chapter 1105. The so-called battle physique was just a general term. It did not refer to one's own body, but something related to one's soul source. For example, Yi Xian had mastered the power of space and nirvana, but he did not have the space-time battle physique or the nirvana battle physique. The so-called battle physique was related to the soul source, which was a mysterious thing. It could also be called the aptitude for cultivation. For example, the Lord of all spirits was born with an affinity to the power of all spirits, which was why he was called the myriad spirit battle physique. The undying heaven Lord had an affinity to the power of nirvana, which was why he was called the nirvana battle physique. The body was just an outer shell. The real core was what was born from the soul source. Liu Baiyi's soul source was extremely mysterious. No matter what kind of cultivation technique was in his hands, he could easily cultivate it without any difficulties. That was why he was called the chaotic spirit physique. Southern Dipper region, Miaofa country. Yi Xian was half lying on a rocking chair. Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaoxian were massaging his shoulders and back. He narrowed his eyes and flipped through the ancient book in his hand, giving off a leisurely appearance. Mister, the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace has sent an invitation to you to participate in the Southern Dipper meeting. Would you like to go? Lin Miaoxian probed for Yi Xian. Southern Dipper meeting? Yi Xian whispered. You killed Yi Mo Luo. Although the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace will not offend you because of this person, if they do not care about it, they will be laughed at by the outside world. Lin Miaofa's eyes flickered. You mean the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace wants to take me down a notch? Yi Xian smiled and instantly understood what Lin Miaofa meant. Obviously, he had casually killed Yi Mo Luo. Although Yi Mo Luo was just a pawn, he was still a member of the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace. The Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace had to regain their dignity. You're right, sir. However, I'm afraid that's only one of the reasons. If I'm not wrong, the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace wants to invite you to join them. That's their true motive, Lin Miaofa said softly. However, there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Lin Miaofa couldn't be blamed for being nervous. Yi Xian's existence was known throughout the Southern Dipper region. He was a living great saint, and rumor had it that Yi Xian was a saint king from 100 million years ago. Although he was only a great saint now, how could such a character not be noticed by all the great sects? Regardless of whether Yi Xian's identity was real or fake, he was indeed a great sage. The 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace naturally wanted to recruit him. If I don't join the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, will they attack me? Yi Xian sneered. That won't happen. However, you killed Yi Mo Luo, so you must give the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace an explanation. After all, the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace is the ruler of the 10th Yuan Hui. If you don't give them face, I'm afraid this matter won't end well, Lin Miaofa said. The so-called great sects cared about their reputation the most. Moreover, the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace was an orthodoxy founded by the Lord of 10,000 Spirit. If someone killed someone from the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace and the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace didn't do anything about it, wouldn't it become a joke to all the great sects? Sir, when the time comes, you just need to give the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace some face and say that you didn't know Yi Mo Luo was from the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. They will definitely use this as an excuse to let this matter pass. After all, a mere Yi Mo Luo can't be compared to you, Lin Miaoxian reminded. You mean to say that I should lower my head and apologize? Yi Xian glanced at Lin Miaoxian from the corner of his eyes. Sir, the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace cannot be offended. Not to mention you, even a Saint King will have to give the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace some face, Lin Miaoxian said while biting her lips. Ha! So what if I don't give them face? Yi Xian sneered. The person who could make Yi Xian lower his head and apologize had not been born yet. Yi Xian had only killed a mere ant. Wanting him to lower his head to the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace was simply a joke. Did Yi Xian not care about his reputation? Sir, you must not act on impulse. Lin Miaofa's expression changed slightly as she hurriedly advised Yi Xian. If the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace's face is their face, then what about my, Yi Xian's, face? Yi Xian's lips curled into a sneer, then he waved at the two girls and said, "Go tell the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace that I will attend the Southern Dipper meeting as promised." Looking at Yi Xian's cold expression, the two girls frowned, but they couldn't say anything else. They hurriedly left Yi Xian's side and replied to the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace's invitation. Humph. Even if you want to keep a low profile, you still have to see who I, Yi Xian, am facing. If I have to endure even some ants, then wouldn't my millions of years of arduous cultivation be a joke? Yi Xian sneered as killing intent flashed through his eyes. There was no need to keep a low profile, nor was there any concession. Since Yi Xian had come to the chaotic world, he had to act in a high-profile manner. Whoever dared to be his enemy, he would just kill them. If Yi Xian encountered an enemy who was more powerful than him, he would temporarily avoid them and wait for his cultivation to improve before he came back to kill the other party. After coming to the chaotic world, Yi Xian did not want to establish any forces. Because he did not want to repeat the mistakes of the Celestial Court in the past. At that time, he had created the 33rd Celestial Court, but in fact, to a large extent, it had restricted him. He did not know how many enemies had used the Celestial Court as a bargaining chip to threaten him, which also made him feel that his hands and feet were tied. From a small mortal to the great sage of today, Yi Xian finally understood a principle. The so-called Taoist sects were only external objects. The only thing that was truly powerful was one's own body. Extra things would only become a burden to oneself. As long as he was strong enough, the so-called orthodoxy was nothing. He alone could equal a sect, and he alone was an orthodoxy. To put it bluntly, Yi Xian's way of survival in the chaotic world was that he had nothing to lose and was not afraid of wearing shoes. He was alone. Whoever dared to be his enemy, he would destroy his whole family. If he encountered an enemy that he could not defeat, Yi Xian would turn around and leave. He would return to kill all his disciples until his cultivation surpassed the strong enemy. Then, he would kill the strong enemy as well. Moreover, Yi Xian had already told a big lie. He claimed that he was the sage king from 100 million years ago. As an ancient sage king, he should have the temperament of a sage king. How could he bow to others and let others see him as a joke? In the battle for the great Tao, if one did not move forward, one would fall behind. Yi Xian was not a reckless man, but some things had to be done forcefully. Otherwise, others would only treat him as a soft persimmon. This so-called Nanda meeting was the time for Yi Xian to establish his power. He would also rise in the Nanda region and really compete with all the enemies. Of course, although Yi Xian did not establish any forces, he also wanted to make some friends, some mutually beneficial friends, which would also be of great benefit to his future. 3 years later. A golden ancient chariot rumbled out of the mystic spell kingdom. At this moment, the wind and clouds changed color. It crossed the sky and headed for the Moyun Mountain. Moyun Mountain. It was vast and boundless, standing up to the sky. The undulating mountain range was like a long dragon between heaven and earth. At a glance, one could not see the end. Chapter 1106. The most shocking thing was that the cloud-scraping mountain was floating in the sky like an immortal divine mountain. It stood between heaven and earth, giving people a sense of majesty and vastness. Rumble. The heaven and earth shook, and the light was dazzling. There were terrifying halos coming from all directions across the sky. Golden jade chariots, sacred beasts, auspicious clouds, and 9 dragons pulling the chariots. It was unknown how many chariots were carrying some important figures toward the cloud-scraping mountain. At the peak of the cloud-scraping mountain, a vast Taoist field appeared. Auspicious clouds floated in the sky, and a grand auspicious cloud banquet appeared. There were fairies singing and dancing, yellow-scarfed strong men beating drums, and little saints welcoming guests. The sky was filled with golden light, illuminating the so-called Southern Dipper small meeting. Ha ha ha. We haven't seen each other for many years. Brother Mo, whose cultivation base is getting more and more profound. I'm impressed. Suddenly, a wild laughter came from the distant sky. A man in a green Taoist robe appeared and strode toward an old man in red. Brother Qing Ming, you must be joking. Please take a seat. Supreme Saint Mo Hua smiled and strode toward Supreme Saint Qing Ming. His face was full of enthusiasm. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, a burst of bell-like laughter rang out. A colorful cloud drifted down, and a woman in a crimson palace dress appeared. We haven't seen each other for many years. Greetings. The nine-tailed celestial fox bowed to the two men. The charming smile on her face was so seductive. Fellow nine-tailed, please take a seat. Supreme Saint Mo Hua's expression changed, but he still smiled and invited the nine-tailed celestial fox into the auspicious cloud banquet. Rumble. The sky shook, and the light was dazzling. A few more figures appeared and entered the auspicious cloud banquet. Supreme Saint Mo Hua also went to welcome them. Tianyi Dao, Xian Qingzi. Nether Sect, Old Devil Yu Ming. Bai Xia Dao, Immortal Jiu Gong. The arrival of three great saints immediately made the place lively. Under Supreme Saint Mo Hua's welcome, everyone took their seats, whoosh. In addition to these great saints, there were hundreds of people from various orthodoxies. The Southern Dipper small meeting was overcrowded. At the auspicious cloud banquet. Big Brother Mo Hua, I heard that this person called Yi Xian was a saint king from 100 million years ago. Is this true? Great Sage Qing Ming asked playfully. Sage ruler. Without waiting for the desert fire saint to respond, Tianyi Xian Qingzi laughed coldly. None of you are children. Even saint kings cannot come out of seclusion. Every one of them is a world-shaking existence. Even if he is a saint king from 100 million years ago, there are traces of him. However, I have never heard of such a person. Ha ha ha. The nine-tailed celestial fox rolled her eyes and smiled. You can't say that. 100 million years ago, the Lord of all spirits achieved Tao. That battle caused the entire starry sky to collapse. Who knows how many saint kings fell? Maybe he really is a saint king. Little sister Nine-Tail is right. We've only lived for a few tens of millions of years. Too many peerless figures appeared 100 million years ago. How would us juniors know them? Yu Ming chuckled coldly. According to what you said, when this Yi Xian comes, do we have to call him senior? Spiritual Master Jiu Gong laughed coldly. It's fine if you want to call him senior. After all, you are famous for being a hypocrite among the great sages. Old Demon Yu Ming sneered. Bang! Spiritual Master Jiu Gong's face turned red. He slammed the table and stood up. The might of a great sage burst forth. He glared at old Demon Yu Ming and said, Brother Yu Ming, what do you mean? What do I mean? Old Demon Yu Ming fiddled with his slender fingernails and laughed coldly. You killed my disciple back then. I haven't settled the score with you yet. What do you think I mean? Old Demon Yu Ming, do you want to fight me? Spiritual Master Jiu Gong's face turned gloomy. The aura of a great sage flowed around him. Alright, I also want to see how capable you, old thief Jiu Gong, are. Rumble. Old Demon Yu Ming slammed the table and stood up. Terrifying chaotic demonic light rumbled as if he was ready to fight at any moment. Fellow Taoists, today is the Southern Dipper meeting held by my 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. If the two of you have any grievances, you can settle them after the Southern Dipper meeting, Supreme Saint Desert Fire warned with a cold expression. Spiritual Master Jiu Gong's face changed slightly. He snorted and sat back down. Old demon Yu Ming sneered, and the terrifying demonic light around him dissipated. Clearly, they did not dare to offend the 10,000 Spirit Palace. After all, the entire Great Southern Dipper region was ruled by the 10,000 Spirit Palace. If they did not respect the 10,000 Spirit Palace, their orthodoxies would not be able to establish themselves in the Great Southern Dipper region. Rumble. Heaven and earth rumbled as rays of light rolled. A golden ancient war chariot rumbled toward cloud-piercing mountain. 3 figures walked out of the war chariot and strode toward the auspicious cloud banquet. Yi Xian walked in front while the 2 ladies followed behind. When the 3 of them entered the auspicious cloud banquet, Supreme Saint Mo Hua's eyes lit up. He quickly stood up and strode toward Yi Xian. Ha ha ha. Supreme Saint Mo Hua laughed out loud. I've long heard of Brother Yi Xian's reputation. Today, I see that you live up to your reputation. Greetings, brother. Supreme Saint Mo Hua was very humble. After all, the purpose of the Southern Dipper meeting was to recruit Yi Xian into the 10,000 Spirit Palace. Naturally, he had to show enough sincerity to Yi Xian. Brother? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Although I've been sleeping for 100 million years and have fallen from the Saint King realm, I'm still your senior. How dare you call me brother? Ah. As Yi Xian's words fell, Supreme Saint Mo Hua's smile suddenly stiffened. He looked at Yi Xian with a touch of hostility in his eyes, but he quickly recovered. Brother, you should understand that the strong are respected in the 5 regions of chaos. Naturally, we have to call each other brother when we're in the same realm. If you recover your Saint King realm cultivation, I'll have to change the way I address you, Supreme Saint Mo Hua said. Well, what you said makes sense. Yi Xian's eyes moved. Brother, please take a seat, Supreme Saint Mo Hua said as he welcomed Yi Xian and the 2 ladies into the auspicious cloud banquet. When Yi Xian brought the 2 ladies into the auspicious cloud banquet, Yi Xian could naturally feel the presence of these great sages. This made him glance at them slightly and then sit down quietly. Yi Xian had not been in the chaotic world for long, and this was the first time he saw people in the same realm as him. Moreover, there were several great sages. However, what made Yi Xian feel slightly strange was that he actually felt that these great sages were extremely weak. Whether it was their physical body or cultivation, they were completely incomparable to him. Could this be related to the mutated chaotic divine tribulation? Yi Xian's mind slightly stirred. He remembered that his origin spirit had once told him that he had passed through a mutated primal chaos holy tribulation and could be said to be invincible in the great sage realm. He was definitely not someone an ordinary great sage could compare to. Now it seemed that all this was true. Chapter 1107. I can't see through this person. Suddenly, the 9-tailed celestial fox muttered in surprise. Ever since Yi Xian entered, she had been observing Yi Xian. However, she was shocked to find that she could not see through Yi Xian's cultivation base. Could this person really be a Saint King from 100 million years ago? Old demon Yu Ming's expression changed slightly. So what if he was a Saint King? He's just like us now. What's there to be surprised about? Great Sage Qing Ming sneered coldly as he looked at Yi Xian with a slightly unfriendly gaze. It was no wonder that Great Sage Qing Ming was hostile towards Yi Xian. After all, he had always wanted to dominate Lin Miaofa. Now that he saw Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaofa following beside Yi Xian, he naturally felt uncomfortable in his heart. Yi Dao Yu, let me give you a toast. Great Sage Mo Hu raised his wine cup and drank it in one gulp. He did not mention that Yi Xian had killed Yi Maluo. As the saying goes, one does not slap a smiling face. Yi Xian nodded slightly and drank the wine in his cup. Fellow Taoist Yi, let me introduce you to the other fellow Taoists here. Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, Great Sage Mo Hua's eyes turned and he stood up to introduce a few people to Yi Xian. This is Great Sage Qing Ming from the Holy Land of Taichu. He knows the true Taichu mantra, no need, I'm not interested in knowing them. Since you invited me here today, just say what you want to say. Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted. How dare you? Great sage Qing Ming rebuked angrily. He could not stand Yi Xian's arrogance. Now that he dared to ignore him, he was completely enraged. Not only was Qing Ming unfriendly, but the others frowned as well. They were also unhappy with Yi Xian's unreasonable behavior. Even if you're a saint king from 100 million years ago, you're only a great saint now. How dare you disregard everyone here? The most awkward one was the Desert Fire Supreme Sage. However, he was also very experienced. He first gave the Green Nether Supreme Sage a subtle look, clearly telling him to suppress his anger and act according to his mood later. Yi Daoyu is indeed a straightforward person. Actually, the reason I invited you to the Southern Dipper meeting is because I hope you can join our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, Great Sage Desert Fire said with a smile. I'm not interested in the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave, Yi Xian said calmly as he beckoned to Lin Miaofa and Lin Qianqian to leave. This scene left the Desert Fire Great Sage stunned. He thought that Yi Xian would agree, and even if he didn't, he would find a reason to tactfully refuse. However, Yi Xian had bluntly refused, not taking him seriously at all. This directly caused the Desert Fire Great Sage's face to redden as flames of fury rose in his chest. Yi Daoyu, let me remind you that this is not 100 million years ago. Our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace is in charge of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace now. If you leave this place, you'll find it difficult to do anything in the future, Great Sage Desert Fire said coldly. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at the Great Sage of Desert Fire. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. You've misunderstood. Our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace may be in charge of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, but we won't bully or threaten you. However, you've killed a member of our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. Aren't you going to give us an explanation? Great Sage Desert Fire poured himself a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. There was no longer any smile on his face. Instead, he looked coldly at Yi Xian. If I were you, I wouldn't say so much nonsense. If you want me to give you an explanation, then we'll have to see if you have the ability to do so, Yi Xian said indifferently. Just how shrewd was Yi Xian? How could he not see that Great Sage Desert Fire had gathered all the great sages here to show him the power of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? He wanted to show him the power of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace so that he would be forced to join them. Unfortunately, Great Sage Desert Fire had miscalculated one thing. Yi Xian had come here to pick a fight. If he wanted to rise in the southern Dou region, he had to establish his power. Yi Xian was a person who would either not do anything, or he would do something shocking. Yi Xian disdained to bully some small orthodoxies. Since the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace was extremely powerful, it was the perfect target for him to establish his power. Perhaps some people would ask if Yi Xian had gone crazy. Why did he have to provoke a colossus like the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? Wasn't this an act of suicide? Actually, the reason was very simple. Firstly, Yi Xian would not lower his head to the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. Secondly, the Lord of all Spirits was in charge of the 10th Yuan Hui. He was the 10th strongest of all eternity. Yi Xian's goal was to become the strongest of all eternity. He could not wait until the 11th Yuan Hui began. According to Yi Xian's guess, if he could kill the Lord of all Spirits, wouldn't he be able to occupy the position of the strongest of all eternity in the 10th Yuan Hui? Although this idea was extremely crazy, Yi Xian firmly believed that it was possible. Therefore, he would have to face the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace sooner or later. The most important problem was that he was now a great saint. He was still extremely far away from becoming the strongest of all eternity. Moreover, the path of cultivation required tempering and opportunity. The 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace was precisely a whetstone that could constantly urge him to improve. Without pressure, there would be no motivation. Only through the tempering of life and death could his cultivation rapidly improve. Yi Xian was very clear about one thing. He was only an ordinary person. All along his path, he had relied on his hard work in cultivation. He had wandered between life and death, and continuously broke through his own cultivation. He did not have Lu Bai's unparalleled talent, nor did he have Lu Bai's exceptional talent. Lu Bai's cultivation path was smooth, and he could climb all the way to the peak. However, he, Yi Xian, did not have this talent. Buddhists often said that all life was equal. However, in Yi Xian's understanding, people could not be compared to each other. Some people were born with great wealth, while others were born with great poverty. Even the starting line was different. How could there be equality? However, Yi Xian believed in one thing. Although he did not have Lu Bai's exceptional talent and aptitude, he could rely on his hard work to climb to the peak step by step. He had also walked all the way to the peak. To put it bluntly, although Lu Bai was Yi Xian's close friend, Yi Xian did not want to be inferior to Lu Bai. He did not want Yi Xian to still be a great saint when the two of them met again. On the other hand, Lu Bai had already stepped into the Saint King realm. Perhaps, he could even surpass the Saint realm. Everyone had a competitive heart, and Yi Xian was no exception. Therefore, he wanted to give himself endless pressure so that when the two of them met again, he would not be inferior to Lu Bai in the slightest. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to use the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace as a whetstone to sharpen his cultivation. Although there was a crisis of life and death, Yi Xian did not care. After all, he had always been like this. Yi Dao Yu, this saint can give you another chance. As long as you bow down and apologize to my 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, the matter of you killing Yi Maluo can be written off, Supreme Saint Emohua said coldly. Supreme Saint Emohua did not want to go too far. He was also giving Yi Xian a chance. Miaofa, if you don't want the Miaofa kingdom to vanish, come to this saint now. Suddenly, Supreme Saint Qingming drank the wine in his cup and looked indifferently at Lin Miaofa and Lu Bai. The might of a great saint faintly burst forth, and the surrounding void was distorted to the extreme. His words were full of coercion. Chapter 1108. The atmosphere was tense and the situation was grim. Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaofa's expressions were heavy. They didn't know how to choose. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. If you two continue to follow him, I'm afraid you'll die without a burial ground. Great sage Qingming swirled his wine cup with a sinister look. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm, and he didn't show any fluctuations. He just looked at the two women indifferently, waiting for them to make their choice. Great sage Qingming, we won't betray Senior Yi. Lin Miaofa flatly refused, but there was a touch of helplessness in her eyes. She then lowered her eyes and didn't say anything. In fact, it wasn't that the two women were loyal to Yi Xian, but that Yi Xian had planted a restriction on them. If they really dared to betray Yi Xian could destroy their souls with a thought. If they had a choice, the two sisters would have left Yi Xian long ago. Why would they follow him? Stubborn. Great sage Qingming's face was filled with rage. He looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy killing intent in his eyes. Yi Dao Yu, I don't want to talk nonsense. My 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace is suppressing the 10th Yuan Hui. If you don't give my 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace an explanation today, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave this place. Great Sage Emohua said coldly. Buzz. Suddenly, Yi Xian took a step forward and strangely appeared in front of Great Sage Emohua. He was looking down at him with a condescending attitude. I have to say that you're very bold. No one has dared to talk to me like this for many years. Yi Xian said calmly. Dang. 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 Great Sage Emohua's expression changed drastically because he didn't see how Yi Xian appeared in front of him. This also made him retreat in shock. He looked at Yi Xian with a heavy expression. Very strong, so strong that it made him feel suffocated. This was what great sage Immortal felt the most. In the primordial spirit void, the world was extremely fast. Ever since Yi Xian stepped into the great sage realm, the great divine ability of the primordial spirit void had already allowed him to cultivate it to the peak. Not to mention the great sages present, even Saint Kings might not be able to capture his trajectory. Actually, in my opinion, you're all just trash. I'm only here because I'm giving face to the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace. Unfortunately, you don't appreciate the face I've shown you and insist on seeking your own deaths. You can't blame me for what happens next. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back and looked around at the crowd. His voice was very calm, as if he was talking about something very casual. You? Bang! The green nether great sage slammed the table and stood up. His great sage aura erupted as he strode towards Yi Xian. Let me see how capable you are. You actually dare to speak such arrogant words in front of us. Thump, thump, thump. The green nether grand sage strode forward. With every step he took, the heavens and earth trembled. The exploding clouds rolled across the heavens and earth as an extremely frightening aura burst forth. Rumble. The green nether grand sage's chaotic great sage aura spread out. A green light sword shot up into the sky and the chaotic aura of slaughter stirred up the endless clouds. The primordial sword technique. He actually cultivated the primordial sword technique? Old demon Yu Ming muttered in shock. I've always heard that the green nether cultivates the primordial sword technique. I didn't expect this guy to actually succeed. The nine-tailed celestial fox's expression changed slightly. The primordial sword technique kills everything. This guy is in big trouble. Taoist Jiu Gong smiled coldly. Clang! 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 The green nether grand sage stood proudly. The primordial sword light circled around him, making him look even more majestic. Among the myriad of chaos, only I, the primordial sword technique, can destroy everything. The green nether grand sage said majestically. His entire person was extremely solemn. I've cultivated the primordial sword technique for 18 million years. Today, I'll test my sword on you. I'll let you know that there's always someone better than you. The green nether grand sage scolded coldly. The primordial sword technique. The green nether grand sage roared into the sky. Billions of miles of clouds were shattered. His sword finger pointed at Yi Xian. The primordial sword light hummed, carrying with it a horrifying power that could destroy everything, and headed for Yi Xian. The primordial sword light can destroy everything. Dodge, or you'll. The nine-tailed celestial fox suddenly shouted. Suddenly, the nine-tailed heavenly fox let out a delicate shout, reminding Yi Xian of how terrifying the absolute beginning sword technique was. However, before she could finish speaking, the following scene completely stunned the nine-tailed heavenly fox. No, it wasn't just the nine-tailed celestial fox. Everyone felt as if they were in a dream. They were completely stunned. Clang! The sound of metal clashing could be heard. A little spark bloomed in the void. A jade-like finger reached out and gently pressed against the primordial sword light. No matter how much the primordial sword light hummed, it couldn't move forward. This is the so-called primordial sword technique? It's so weak and pitiful. Yi Xian pointed a finger at the tip of the primordial sword light. He frowned slightly as he muttered to himself. This so-called primordial sword technique couldn't hurt him at all. How is this possible? The green nether grand sage roared in shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. The primordial sword technique, which he had cultivated for 18 million years, was broken so easily. It wasn't just the green nether grand sage who couldn't believe it. The other supreme saints present all gasped. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed what they were seeing. It was worth noting that the most powerful magic of the Holy Land of Taichu was the primordial sword technique. Anyone who had cultivated the primordial sword technique would be called a sword saint. They had extremely terrifying offensive power in the Supreme Saint plane. Boom! Suddenly, Yi Xian flicked his finger. The primordial sword light crumbled. The terrifying residual power of the saint blew away billions of miles of clouds. The so-called auspicious cloud banquet turned into a vacuum. I don't believe it. The Green Nether Grand Sage's eyes were red. He couldn't accept this fact at all. His cultivation of a supreme saint was raised to the extreme. Dozens of primordial sword lights spread out. He looked at Yi Xian with extremely terrifying murderous intent in his eyes. Primordial sword technique, kill. The Green Nether Grand Sage's sword finger was like a wheel that covered the sky. Dozens of primordial sword lights all shot toward Yi Xian. This was obviously his strongest attack. Clang! Clang! Something terrifying happened. Yi Xian didn't dodge. He let the primordial sword lights shoot on his body. They couldn't even break through his skin. Only the terrifying sound of impact exploded between heaven and earth. How is this possible? How is this possible? The Green Nether Grand Sage used his most powerful technique, but it didn't pose any threat to Yi Xian. He was dumbfounded. He felt like he was in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. I don't believe it. Suddenly, the Green Nether Grand Sage's eyes were as red as blood. He wanted to use the primordial sword technique again. But before he could do anything, Yi Xian stepped out and quietly appeared before him. You really are a piece of trash. You are so weak that I can't even look at you. Yi Xian said in disgust. Die. The Green Nether Grand Sage's face was red. He slammed his palm toward Yi Xian's head. A firefly dares to compete with the moon? The heaven and earth exploded and everything collapsed. Yi Xian slammed his palm. The terrifying chaotic saint aura pressed down on the Green Nether Grand Sage's body. He couldn't dodge at all. Chapter 1109. Bang! Wah! Yi Xian's attack was too terrifying. It directly struck the top of the Green Nether Great Sage's head, causing him to bleed from his 7 orifices. His entire body was sent flying thousands of miles away, and the blood in his mouth sprayed out into the air. However, it was not over yet. Yi Xian took a step forward and instantly appeared before the Green Nether Grand Sage. His 5 fingers were like a curtain that covered the sky. He suddenly grabbed the Green Nether Grand Sage's hair and teleported him back to the Southern Dipper meeting. Bang! Yi Xian threw the Green Nether Grand Sage to the ground as if he was throwing away trash. He stepped on his head, and the wide soles of his feet crushed half of the Green Nether Grand Sage's head into the ground. Silence, silence, dead silence. When this terrifying scene appeared before everyone's eyes, the heavens and earth were terrifyingly silent. The sound of people gasping could be heard continuously. How is this possible? The Desert Fire Grand Sage said in a trembling voice. We are both great saints, how can he be so powerful? The nine-tailed celestial fox murmured in horror. She looked at Yi Xian with great fear in her eyes. Combat constitution. He must have some kind of combat constitution. Otherwise, his physical body can't be so strong, the Netherworld old demon said in a trembling voice. They naturally knew how powerful the Green Nether Grand Sage was. However, when faced with Yi Xian, he did not even have the strength to fight back and was suppressed in an instant. This made them extremely frightened. In fact, they did not know that although they were both great saints, the Green Nether Grand Sage and Yi Xian were not at the same level. The Green Nether Grand Sage was just an ordinary great saint, but Yi Xian was different. He had passed the chaotic divine tribulation, and he cultivated the immortal scripture, which was the most powerful technique created by the immortal God Lord. Moreover, don't forget that Yi Xian controlled the space-time power and the nirvanic power. With these factors added together, Yi Xian was an invincible existence in the Great Sage realm. How could a mere Qingming Great Sage be his opponent? Of course, Yi Xian did not use the power of time and space and the power of nirvanic extermination at all, because these two supreme powers were related to the Undying Heaven Palace and the Temporal Temple. If he really used them, it would definitely attract the attention of the two colossi. Moreover, Yi Xian's own cultivation base was enough to suppress a mere green nether great sage. There was no need for him to use these two supreme powers. Ah! Abruptly, an ear-piercing shriek rang out from beneath Yi Xian's feet. The green nether great sage was howling in anger and humiliation. Clearly, being trampled beneath Yi Xian's feet was a great humiliation to him. Rumble. The green nether great sage channeled his cultivation base and tried to stand up, but Yi Xian's physical body and cultivation base were too terrifying. The soles of his feet were like the immemorial stars pressing down on his body. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stand up. Let me go. The green nether great sage was humiliated to the extreme and roared at Yi Xian. He was a dignified great sage, but now he was being trampled under someone's feet. If this matter spread out, he would become the laughing stock of the great Nanda territory. Maybe you don't know, but anyone who offends me is a dead man, Yi Xian said lightly. You dare to kill me. I am from the holy land of Taichu. If you dare to kill me, the holy land of Taichu will not let you go. The green nether great sage roared angrily. He didn't believe that Yi Xian would dare to kill him. Yi Dao Yu, where it is possible to forgive, forgive. Why don't you give me face and let him go? The desert fire great sage frowned slightly. After seeing Yi Xian's terrifying cultivation base, he didn't want to make things difficult for Yi Xian. After all, great sages of this level were rare in the entire Great Nanda territory. Who do you think you are to ask me to give you face? Yi Xian sneered. You. The desert fire great sage's expression changed. He never thought that Yi Xian would be so arrogant that he didn't take him seriously. Was he not afraid of offending the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace? Yi Dao Yu, the holy land of Taichu has a Saint King great ancestor. Don't make a mistake. As long as you let me go today, the grudge between you and me will be written off. The green nether great sage finally calmed down. He warned Yi Xian coldly because he already felt Yi Xian's murderous intent locked on him. Oh! A Saint King. Yi Xian's eyes lit up slightly. He moved his foot away from the green nether great sage's head. This also made the green nether great sage stand up instantly. A touch of pride flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian, today's shame will be engraved in my heart. The holy land of Taichu will remember your name, the green nether great sage said coldly. With a flick of his sleeve, he was about to leave. It was obvious that he was defeated by Yi Xian and was even trampled under his feet. This was a great humiliation to him. If he hadn't brought up the Saint King great ancestor behind him, he would have died at the hands of Yi Xian today. Did I allow you to leave? Suddenly, without waiting for the green nether great sage to leave, Yi Xian's cold voice sounded. The green nether great sage's expression changed. He looked back at Yi Xian gloomily and said, I've already lost. What else do you want? Yi Xian shook his head in disappointment. He looked at the green nether great sage as if he was looking at an idiot. Didn't I just say that anyone who offends me is a dead man? Yi Xian said ruthlessly. The green nether great sage was stunned. He didn't understand the meaning of Yi Xian's words. But in the next moment, his eyes widened in horror and a scream came from his mouth. You! What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Of course I want to kill you. Because those who threaten me are all dead. Rumble. Yi Xian whispered in a low voice. The chaotic saint aura burst out. When he slammed out his palm, the mountains and rivers instantly froze. The terrifying aura pressed down on the green nether great sage's body, making him unable to move at all. Yi Xian was invincible in the same realm. This was the unparalleled power of Yi Xian. Throughout the history of supreme saints, no one could be his opponent. Bang! This palm was like an ancient star. This palm was like a millstone that could destroy the world. It directly blew up the green nether great sage in the sky. Even at the moment of his death, the green nether great sage didn't know what kind of terrifying character he had offended. His soul scattered and blood rained down. When the green nether great sage fell between heaven and earth, the desert fire great sage and the others looked at each other in a daze. They didn't recover for a long time. You're really weak and pitiful. Rumble. The Calamity Transcender technique was activated. Yi Xian turned into a mass of black fog and swallowed the blood energy of the green nether great sage. When the black fog dissipated, Yi Xian appeared again and burped in satisfaction. Chi! A cosmos bag fell and was directly taken by Yi Xian. Yi Xian's face revealed a satisfied smile. Obviously, Yi Xian wasn't satisfied after using the Calamity Transcender technique to swallow the blood energy of the green nether great sage. This cosmos bag belonged to the green nether great sage, so there should be a lot of good things inside. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't let it go. Chapter 11:10. The so-called killing a great sage wasn't because Yi Xian was too strong, but because the green nether great sage was too weak. He was so weak that Yi Xian didn't even put him in his eyes. Great sages were indeed terrifying, and they were also overlords. However, the great sage realm was divided into different levels, and the green nether great sage was undoubtedly the weakest. When this bloody and strange scene appeared, the faces of Great Sage Desert Fire and the others turned pale, and they quietly retreated. They looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a madman. Yi Daoyu, you've gone too far. What kind of evil technique did you use? Great Sage Desert Fire angrily rebuked, but if one listened carefully, they would find that his eyes were slightly trembling, and even his voice was trembling. This proved how frightened he was of Yi Xian. This was because when Yi Xian used the Tribulation Transcender technique, his soul was trembling to the extreme. Hee hee. A smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He looked at Great Sage Desert Fire indifferently and said, "Didn't you want me to give your 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace an explanation? What do you think of this explanation?" You. Great Sage Desert Fire clenched his fists and then slowly relaxed them. The fear in his eyes gradually calmed down. Great Sage Desert Fire coldly said, "Yi Daoyu, do you know that your actions today not only incur the hatred of the Holy Land of Taichu, but also offend my 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? In the struggle for the Great Tao, if one doesn't advance, one will retreat. If one is afraid of the slightest thing, how can one achieve supreme cultivation?" Yi Xian coldly laughed. Since he dared to kill the Green Sea Great Sage, he didn't care about these things. "I hope you won't regret it in the future." Great Sage Desert Fire flung his sleeves and said coldly. Great Sage Desert Fire was very self-aware. At most, he was only a little stronger than the Green Nether Great Sage. He wasn't a match for Yi Xian at all, so there was no need to fight with Yi Xian. Moreover, the technique Yi Xian just used was too strange. If he wasn't mistaken, it was a great technique that could devour other people's cultivation. At this moment, he absolutely couldn't fight with Yi Xian, so he directly ordered Yi Xian to leave. However, the Desert Fire Great Sage understood very well that the Holy Land of Taichu wouldn't let Yi Xian off after he killed the Green Nether Great Sage. He was afraid that the old Sage King who was silent in the Holy Land of Taichu would come out, and Yi Xian wouldn't live for long. At that time, he would naturally deal with him. It's easy to invite the gods, but it's hard to send them off. Haven't you heard of this before? Yi Xian smiled sinisterly. What do you want? Great Sage Desert Fire's expression changed. It wasn't until now that he realized that Yi Xian wasn't a pushover. He was afraid that he didn't come with good intentions. Actually, I'm a very reasonable person. As long as you hand over your Qiankuan bag, I'll turn around and leave without saying a word. But if you don't do as I say, then I can only let you die here. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. A threat, a naked threat. Yi Xian's purpose here was very simple. First, to establish his power. Second, to plunder and devour. Yes, to plunder and devour. There were endless spiritual treasures in the chaotic world, and Yi Xian had just come to the chaotic world, so he didn't have any cultivation resources. If Yi Xian were to search for them bit by bit, it wouldn't be his character. For Yi Xian, the fastest way was to plunder and devour these great sages. These great sages had lived for tens of millions of years, so they must have accumulated a lot of things. This naturally made Yi Xian extremely tempted. In addition to hard work, cultivation naturally required the help of external things. Elixirs, spirit stones, heaven and earth treasures, these external things were indispensable. They could greatly shorten Yi Xian's cultivation time. Yi Xian didn't lack cultivation techniques. He had the immortal scripture and the boundless mortal world technique in his hands. His weapons were the heaven-punishing halberd and the nirvana battle armor. The only thing he lacked now was cultivation resources. Since stepping into the great sage realm, Yi Xian's cultivation had stagnated. According to Yi Xian's calculations, if he wanted to cultivate to the sage king realm, it would take him 50 million years alone. This was unacceptable to him. Although the calamity transcendence technique was powerful and could devour other people's cultivation, everyone's cultivation was impure. Even if he devoured a great sage, it wouldn't increase his own cultivation much, unless he could devour a sage king realm character. However, Yi Xian didn't know how powerful a sage king realm character was. This matter needed to be planned slowly. Therefore, the Qiankuan bags in the hands of these great sages became Yi Xian's target. You're delusional. The great sage of desert fire was finally enraged as he loudly reprimanded Yi Xian. You are indeed very strong, but do you really think we are easy to bully? Spiritual Master Jiu Gong's face was cold as he slowly got up. The power of a great sage faintly overflowed. Yi Daoyu, I don't have any grudges against you, and I don't want to be your enemy. However, if you want my Qiankuan bag, then I will not be polite. Old Demon Yuming said coldly. Ha ha ha. Nine-tailed Fox smiled coquettishly and walked towards Yi Xian. She said, Yi Daoyu is really arrogant. Don't you know that you will offend us by doing this? Or is Yi Daoyu confident that he can take on 4 of us by himself? If I were you, I would obediently hand over the Qiankuan bag. Otherwise, if you are injured or die, then don't blame me. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Oh. Nine-tailed Fox's delicate face moved and she chuckled. Fellow Taoists, it seems that this Yi Daoyu is very confident. Then, what are we waiting for? Kill. Great Sage Mo Hua's chest had been filled with raging anger for a long time. Extremely terrifying power of a great sage bloomed and he directly shot out a Tongtian great technique towards Yi Xian. The others followed closely behind. Extremely terrifying great sage power erupted and blasted towards Yi Xian. The 4 great sages attacked without any hesitation. Obviously, it was impossible for them to hand over their Qiankuan bags. Those who could become great sages naturally had the pride of a great sage. How could they be afraid just because Yi Xian killed great sage Qingming? Moreover, with the 4 of them joining forces, they did not believe that Yi Xian could really take on 4 of them. Rumble. The world turned upside down and the sun and moon lost their light. A great battle broke out with a loud bang. The clouds within hundreds of millions of miles turned into dust. The terrifying power of a great sage erupted, causing the world to shake to the extreme. It did not take long. Only half an hour passed. When the clouds and mist dissipated, a miserable scene also appeared. The 4 great sages' faces were bruised and swollen. Even their clothes were tattered. They were lying on the ground like dead dogs. Blood was constantly flowing from the corners of their mouths. Their bodies were constantly twitching in the clouds, and painful groans could be heard from time to time. Not bad, the harvest is not bad. Yi Xian held the 4 qiankuan bags in his hand with a satisfied smile on his face. He casually put away the 4 qiankuan bags, then narrowed his eyes and looked at the 4 people lying on the ground. Wouldn't it have been better if you had handed them over earlier? Look at your pitiful appearance. Yi Xian sighed. Wah! Great Sage Desert Fire spat out a mouthful of old blood. He looked at Yi Xian with a face full of anger and said, "My 10,000 spirit heavenly palace will not let you go." Bang! Yi Xian slapped out, directly smashing Great Sage Desert Fire's body into pieces and killing him. The Tribulation Transcender technique burst out with a loud bang, turning into a black mist that filled the sky and swallowing his cultivation base and blood energy. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air and whispered with slight disgust, "You talk so much nonsense. Just die." Chapter 11:11. They were scared out of their wits. The remaining great sages were scared out of their wits by Yi Xian. Great Sage Mo Hua, who was still alive and kicking, was killed in an instant. They felt like they were dreaming. It was fine that Yi Xian killed Great Sage Qing Ming, but Great Sage Mo Hua was from the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Yi Xian killed him just like that. Wasn't he afraid of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace's revenge? Suddenly, the 9-tailed heavenly fox and the others shivered because Yi Xian's sinister gaze fell onto them. An extremely terrifying killing intent firmly locked onto them. No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. Yi Xian muttered sinisterly as he sized them up. It was obvious that he had the intention of killing them and devouring their cultivation. 9-tailed Fox's heart was clear. When she felt Yi Xian's killing intent, she hurriedly pleaded, "Fellow Taoist, we have no enmity between us. Please let me live. My heavenly demon temple will definitely repay you generously in the future. Yi Dao Yu, the more friends you have, the more options you have. Even if you kill us, it won't do you much good," old demon Yu Ming said. "Fellow Taoist, although my Bixia sect is not a famous sect, we are still quite famous in the Great Southern Dou region. You have already killed Great Sage Mo Hua and Qing Ming. If you kill us as well, I'm afraid you will really incur the wrath of everyone," Taoist Jiu Gong said with a slight frown. Bang! Blood rained down as his body exploded. Taoist Jiu Gong died without leaving any bones behind. He was slapped into a pile of mush by Yi Xian. "I hate it when people threaten me the most," Yi Xian muttered in disgust. Gasp! Gasps could be heard continuously. Old demon Yu Ming and 9-tailed Fox's eyes were filled with fear. They were already shocked by Yi Xian's cruel methods. At this moment, they didn't even dare to utter a single word. Yi Xian killed someone just because they said something wrong. The two of them had lived for tens of millions of years, but they had never seen such a ruthless person. Yi Xian was ruthless and merciless. He would kill your entire family if you didn't agree with him. This had always been Yi Xian's way of doing things. He also believed in the principle of removing the roots when cutting weeds. Yi Xian was very clear that when he came to the chaotic world, he would never establish any orthodoxy. He would fight alone in the chaotic world, so that there would be no burden. Anyone who offended him, he would kill them. This was the simplest way to deal with them, and it would also intimidate those who wanted to be his enemy. When he was in the 3 realms, he had too many scruples, so he was in danger again and again. This time, Yi Xian learned his lesson and came to the chaotic world alone. "Fellow Taoists, do you want to live or die?" Yi Xian half-squatted in front of the two with a gentle smile on his face, as if he was talking to a close friend. "I want to live, of course I want to live." Old demon Yu Ming smiled flatteringly, but his eyes were filled with fear. He was afraid that Yi Xian would suddenly kill him. Fellow Taoist, you are so powerful. I admire you. The 9 celestial foxes forced a smile. Actually, I am a very reasonable person, and I don't like to kill people. If they didn't threaten me just now, I wouldn't have killed them. Don't you think so? Yi Xian said softly. Of course, they are digging their own graves. Old Demon Yuming hurriedly added. No matter what you want us to do, we will definitely not refuse. The 9 celestial foxes said humbly. Ha! Yi Xian smiled, and he was very satisfied. He patted the 2 of them on their shoulders and said, as the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. I like smart people, and the 2 of you are undoubtedly very smart. As Yi Xian spoke, he flipped his hand and 2 jade slips appeared. He threw them to the 2 of them and said, Fellow Taoists, please sign the agreement and write that you owe me 100 million spirit stones. Then, you may leave. Yi Xian paused for a moment, then smiled and said, Of course, this is the payment for your lives. If you don't want to sign the agreement, it is fine, but, Yi Xian did not continue, but the cruel smile on his face said everything. If the 2 of them did not sign the agreement, then they would both die here. The 9-tailed celestial fox and old demon Yuming's expressions changed, but they did not hesitate. They quickly signed the agreement on the jade slips and then respectfully handed the jade slips to Yi Xian. Well done. Yi Xian took the jade slips and nodded with appreciation. The Chaos Spirit Stone was a product of the chaotic world, and it was essential for cultivators. This kind of spirit stone could improve one's cultivation very quickly, and the spiritual power contained in the Chaos Spirit Stone was extremely pure. Yi Xian naturally would not let it go. Of course, at this moment, their Qiankuan bags were taken away by Yi Xian, and they could not have any spirit stones on them. However, the 2 of them were from the orthodoxy, and Yi Xian asked them to sign the agreement. Naturally, he would go to their orthodoxy to ask for it. In fact, the so-called agreement was dispensable to Yi Xian. He just needed an excuse. Otherwise, if he went to their orthodoxy to ask for the spirit stones, it would be unreasonable. At this moment, Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaofa looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. The 2 of them did not expect Yi Xian's cultivation to be so terrifying that he could kill 2 great sages and make the 9-tailed celestial fox and old demon Yuming bow down to him. Young friend's cultivation. Suddenly, an ancient voice came from the heavens and earth. The clouds for hundreds of millions of miles rumbled and shook. A boundlessly imposing figure was walking over from the distant horizon. In just a breath's time, he abruptly appeared in the southern Dipper party. Rumble. The clouds rolled, and the holy light was piercingly cold. The chaotic streamer circled around the person, and the world seemed to be frozen. The dazzling light was extremely bright. Holy King Hun Tian. Old demon Yuming's face changed slightly when he saw the person. He did not expect Holy King Hun Tian to appear here. Greetings, Holy King Hun Tian. The 9-tailed celestial fox raised her eyebrows and hurriedly bowed to the person. Greetings, Holy King Hun Tian. Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaofa's faces turned pale. They hurriedly knelt down and did not dare to raise their heads. Holy King Hun Tian. The deputy temple master of the All Spirits Temple in the Great Southern Dipper region was a truly amazing person. It took him only 50 million years to step into the Holy King realm. He was definitely an overlord in the Great Southern Dipper region. Greetings, Holy King Hun Tian. Hundreds of little saints were originally watching from afar. When they saw Holy King Hun Tian arrive, they hurriedly rushed over and knelt on the ground to worship him. Rise, all of you. Holy King Hun Tian had a handsome face and looked like a weak scholar. There was no aura around him, and he was looking at Yi Xian with a smile. Thank you, Holy King. The cheers were like a tsunami as they kowtowed and thanked him. Only then did the crowd stand up uneasily. From this, one could see how terrifying Holy King Hun Tian's power was. A holy king. In the entire Great Southern Dipper region, a holy king was the supreme existence. Every orthodoxy must have a holy king to truly stand firm in the Great Southern Dipper region. However, holy kings rarely appeared in the world. To a large extent, they were cultivating in seclusion to prepare to step into the creation realm. No one expected Holy King Hun Tian to appear here. Chapter 11-12. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned as he gloomily looked at Saint King Hun Tian. Saint King Hun Tian was also looking at Yi Xian. Their gazes intertwined in the air, causing the atmosphere in the area to become heavy. You fought against 4 and killed 2 great saints in the same realm. With your cultivation, you can't find many in the Great Nandu region, Saint King Hun Tian said with a smile. You're not bad either. I didn't even notice your existence, Yi Xian said faintly. Even in the face of a saint king, he didn't move at all. If one observed carefully, they would find that Yi Xian looked at Saint King Hun Tian with a hint of eagerness. Since Yi Xian entered the chaotic world, he hadn't used his full cultivation. The so-called great saints were too weak in his eyes. They were not on the same level as him. Saint King Hun Tian in front of him finally gave him a great pressure. Just the release of the Saint King's aura directly ignited his long-dormant fighting spirit. Little friend, join the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. I can give you the position of an elder. When you step into the Saint King realm, you can directly become the Deputy Palace Master of the 10,000 Spirit Palace. If you can step into the creation realm in the future, the 10,000 Spirit Palace in the Great Nandu region will be under your rule, Saint King Hun Tian said solemnly. I'm curious. I killed Great Saint Immortal. Don't you want to avenge him? Yi Xian said faintly. He's just a piece of trash. It doesn't matter if he's dead. Our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace has no shortage of so-called great saints. Since you have such battle strength in the Great Saint realm, you can completely replace Immortal. It's better than trading with our 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace, Saint King Hun Tian said bluntly. Oh. What if I don't want to join the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? Yi Xian smiled coldly. Saint King Hun Tian frowned slightly, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Those who submit will live, and those who disobey will die. Life and death are only in your hands. I hope you won't make a mistake. I heard that there are 3 realms in the Saint King realm, Little Saint King, Great Saint King, and 9 Heavens Saint King. I see that you are only a little Saint King. What right do you have to decide my life and death? Yi Xian sneered. Sacred King Hun Tian's expression turned cold when he heard Yi Xian's words. He looked at Yi Xian gloomily. The Holy King cannot be humiliated. If he is humiliated, he must be killed. This is the principle of the chaotic world. Although I cherish talents, you should not be arrogant and violate the taboo. Today, I can only kill you here. Rumble. The sky darkened, and everything fell into oblivion. Sacred King Hun Tian's voice echoed in the void of the heavens. The Holy King's aura suppressed the sky, and the extremely bright light illuminated this part of the world. As a Holy King, Sacred King Hun Tian had his own dignity. Even if he wanted to recruit Yi Xian was courting death for speaking rudely. Of course, Sacred King Hun Tian did not want to kill Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian's cultivation was so strong among the great saints. This kind of talent was what the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace needed. However, he also wanted to teach Yi Xian a lesson and let him know that there was always someone better out there. Destroy. Sacred King Grand Art, the sky fell and the earth cracked. Sacred King Hun Tian was cold and majestic. His 5 fingers seemed to want to crush this part of the world. With just a palm strike, the chaotic law in this part of the world went berserk. Rumble. With a single strike from a Saint King, all living things would sink into oblivion. The terrifying law of primal chaos was filled with it as it directly suppressed Yi Xian. The destructive power was simply impossible to look directly at. Just you. You still have a long way to go. Suddenly, Yi Xian smiled sinisterly. He stretched out his 5 fingers and formed a giant palm of the heavens. A tyrannical and boundless force erupted as he struck towards Saint King Hun Tian. Bang! Heaven and earth exploded. When the 2 terrifying attacks collided, the world rumbled and shook. The clouds within hundreds of millions of miles collapsed and reformed. Terrifying spatial cracks faintly overflowed. Rumble. What happened next shocked everyone. When the 2 of them collided with each other, both of them were directly sent flying. When this scene appeared, it completely shocked everyone present. How is this possible? Nine-tailed fox screamed in horror. She could not believe her eyes. Yi Xian and Sacred King Hun Tian had clashed, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. Battle physique. He must have some kind of battle physique. Old Demon Yuming trembled and growled. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Even if he has a battle physique, he can defeat a sacred king who is 1 level higher than him. How can such a person appear in the Great Nandu region? Nine-tailed fox trembled. Nothing is impossible. Don't forget that he once said that he was a sacred king from 100 million years ago. Now it seems like it's true. Old Demon Yuming trembled and whispered. Sister, he can actually defeat Sacred King Hun Tian. Lin Miaoxian trembled and asked. What a terrifying person. It seems that the rise of the mystic spell kingdom is all because of this person. Lin Miaoxian clenched her fists and looked at Yi Xian with a strange light in her eyes. It seemed like she had made a decision at this moment. Above the sky. Rumble. The sky clouds rolled, and killing intent rose. Sacred King Hun Tian strode back, and Yi Xian also walked toward him from the other side. The 2 of them faced each other from thousands of miles away. However, this time, the pride on Saint King Hun Tian's face disappeared. A trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian, and his brows tightly knitted together. It's not a battle constitution, but his cultivation is extremely refined. Even my saint power isn't as pure as his. What kind of cultivation technique is he cultivating? Saint King Hun Tian's heart was in turmoil. Sacred King Hun Tian could feel that Yi Xian was extremely powerful. Although Yi Xian's cultivation was not as high as his saint power was extremely pure, as if there were no impurities. Sacred King Hun Tian was also at a disadvantage. At this moment, the blood qi in his body was constantly surging. As a Saint King Hun Tian was naturally knowledgeable. In the chaotic world, there were more than a dozen amazing geniuses who could fight with people of a higher realm. Saint King Hun Tian knew about them. However, these monstrous geniuses were all famous and were from various orthodoxies. He had never heard of Yi Xian. What shocked Sacred King Hun Tian the most was that he found that Yi Xian did not have a battle physique at all. His body gave him a sense of perfection and indestructibility, but there was no aura of a battle physique. Strange. Extremely strange. Yi Xian suddenly became mysterious in Sacred King Hun Tian's eyes, and a solemn look flashed across his eyes. The so-called Sacred King is just so. I really thought you were powerful. Yi Xian stood in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at Sacred King Hun Tian indifferently, his voice echoing in the sky. The blow just now completely let Yi Xian understand how powerful he was. The so-called Sacred King Hun Tian's cultivation was only on par with his. Obviously, he, who had passed the variant chaotic saint tribulation, could fight across realms. He was not afraid of a sacred king at all. Of course, although Yi Xian could fight across realms, he did not underestimate his opponent. After all, Sacred King Hun Tian was only a junior sacred king who had just entered the Saint King realm. Yi Xian did not have any complacency. Moreover, cultivation did not represent combat strength. Sacred King Hun Tian would not know how strong he was until he tried. After all, none of the sacred kings were simple, even if Sacred King Hun Tian was only a junior sacred king. You are very powerful, but unfortunately, a supreme saint is only a supreme saint. You don't understand the means of a sacred king. Today, I will show you. Bang! 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 9-colored sacred light soared into the sky, and the sky rumbled. A total of 9 doors appeared in front of Sacred King Hun Tian, directly stirring up the wind and clouds. An unimaginable killing intent of a sacred king erupted. The 9 great doors remained motionless since ancient times. An ancient and heavy aura filled the air. When the 9 great doors swayed slightly, a terrifying killing intent that could suppress everything locked onto Yi Xian's body. A sacred king divine power. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Come, let me see how powerful a so-called sacred king is. Don't let me down, or it will be too boring. A strand of primal chaos mist coiled around his body. His entire body looked mysterious and profound, giving off an extremely unfathomable feeling. Chapter 11-13. Little Great Saint, how dare you be so arrogant? Rumble. The 9 great doors covered the sky and covered the sun. The vast universe was distorted to the extreme as strands of holy light that could destroy the heavens and earth overflowed. The 9 great doors rumbled as they descended towards Yi Xian. This was a Saint King grand art, a killing technique with the power to destroy all things in the world. The Saint King's power was not something an ordinary great saint could resist. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not an ordinary great saint. Even in the face of a so-called Saint King, Yi Xian did not retreat. He only treated it as a training ground. You're courting death. Yi Xian coldly spoke as he stretched out his 10 fingers. The entire world exploded, and the vast stars in the chaotic starry sky fell down, drawing a diagram of a group of stars falling from the sky. It was incomparably beautiful and resplendent. Stars fell from the sky, emitting explosive sounds between heaven and earth. The stars seemed to be extremely resplendent and beautiful, but they were filled with the power to destroy the heavens and earth. It was also the heaven and earth great technique that Yi Xian had used. Rumble. The 9 great gates rotated the universe and the stars fell from the sky. When the 2 grand arts collided, the world completely exploded. The eruption of terrifying power turned millions of miles of mountains and rivers into ashes. Bang! 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 The sound of the explosion was heard as the 9 great gates exploded one after another. Saint King Hun Tian's throat rolled and his face turned slightly red. He swallowed back a mouthful of blood. Terrifying, too terrifying. Saint King Hun Tian was actually at a disadvantage in the clash of grand arts. The blood in his body surged like monstrous waves, but he could not spit out blood because too many people were watching this battle. If he spit out blood, he would become the laughingstock of the great southern Dou territory. Take my punch. Yi Xian took a step forward, causing tens of thousands of ripples to ripple beneath his feet. He instantly appeared in front of Saint King Hun Tian, and when he punched out, even the space around him collapsed. Facing Yi Xian's devastating punch, Saint King Hun Tian didn't have time to dodge at all. The blood in his body had just been suppressed by him, but he had no choice but to face Yi Xian's terrifying strike. Die! Saint King Hun Tian roared furiously and punched out at Yi Xian. His terrifying Saint King body erupted with boundless power. Clang! The sky exploded and the space collapsed. When the 2 fists collided, the terrifying saint light continued to shatter the surrounding space and then turned into millions of miles of chi waves that spread in all directions. Ah! Saint King Hun Tian roared in anger as he poured all of his cultivation into his fist. He was determined to suppress Yi Xian with a single punch. You still have a long way to go. Yi Xian cruelly roared as his body emitted a primal chaos holy light. The terrifying primal chaos laws circulated around his body before converging on his fist. Die! Rumble! Yi Xian's fist shook the heavens and the primal chaos trembled. Yi Xian's fist was like an ancient star that was falling. With an earth-shattering explosion, Saint King Hun Tian was blasted flying. Crack! Wah! The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Sacred King Hun Tian's fist shattered inch by inch, and then the fragments spread along his arm. Sacred King Hun Tian spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying into the distance like a broken ball. How is this possible? Such a scene shocked the world. Everyone who was watching this battle was stunned on the spot, and the sound of them sucking in cold breaths could be heard from their mouths. It was unimaginable and unimaginable. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. What bullshit, Saint King? He's just a piece of trash. Yi Xian's voice shook the heavens and earth. He didn't seem to make any movements, but when he took a step forward, he suddenly appeared in front of Saint King Hun Tian. His terrifying foot seemed to be able to pierce through the earth as it stomped towards Saint King Hun Tian's chest. Bang! Crack! The sound of ribs breaking could be heard. Saint King Hun Tian's chest caved in as Yi Xian stomped on him. The two of them fell toward the vast earth like meteors. Bang! Rumble! Saint King Hun Tian's body slammed into the earth and spat out another mouthful of blood. Yi Xian's foot was still on his chest. How dare you humiliate me? Saint King Hun Tian roared furiously. Being stomped on by Yi Xian made him extremely embarrassed and angry, but the pain from his body made him groan. Saint King recovery technique. Boom! The 10,000 arts holy light soared into the sky. The great sage of the chaotic heavens exploded with boundless power and finally sent Yi Xian flying. Pure white holy light erupted from his body as his injuries rapidly recovered. A Saint King was, after all, a Saint King with unimaginable power. Although he was continuously suppressed by Yi Xian, he still had the power to fight back. You're from the Panga clan. Saint King Hun Tian's face was ashen as he looked at Yi Xian with fear in his eyes. Terrifying. Too terrifying. If the shocking technique that Yi Xian unleashed shocked Saint King Hun Tian, then the power that Yi Xian's physical body erupted with shocked Saint King Hun Tian to the core. Crushing. It was a complete and utter suppression. Yi Xian's punch just now was like an ancient star bombarding his body. Even his Saint King body could not withstand it, but his opponent was only a great saint. In this chaotic world, there were shocking geniuses who could fight across realms, but only the Panga clan could cultivate their physical body to such a terrifying level. Therefore, Saint King Hun Tian was extremely shocked. Yi Xian was most likely from the Panga clan. Otherwise, how could he, a mere great saint, crush him, a Saint King? Boundless heaven and earth, 10,000 laws without death. Observing the primal chaos, 10,000 laws resonate. I never thought that a Saint King like you would actually be a frog at the bottom of a well. Could it be that only the Panga clan can cultivate the undying body? Yi Xian mocked coldly as a trace of contempt flashed through his eyes. You! Saint King Hun Tian's face turned red. He was so angry that he could not speak, but he looked at Yi Xian with more and more surprise and doubt. If Yi Xian was a member of the Panga clan, Saint King Hun Tian could find a way out. However, Yi Xian denied this identity, which also proved that Yi Xian was only cultivating. This contained extremely terrifying things. The legend of the chaos. There were 12 supreme battle bodies in the chaos, and many more terrifying physiques. However, there was an obscure saying in the illusory legend. If someone could defeat the 12 supreme battle bodies with a mortal body, then this person would be the biggest variable in the chaos, and he might even become an existence that surpassed the strongest of all time. However, legends were legends after all. The 12 supreme battle bodies of the chaos had suppressed all time. Not to mention the so-called mortal body, even other mutated physiques could not resist the 12 supreme battle bodies of the chaos. However, Sacred King Hun Tian suddenly had an extremely absurd thought. Could it be that the person in front of him had a mortal body? Chapter 11:14. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Suddenly, Sacred King Hun Tian dispelled this absurd thought. Even if Yi Xian's physical body was stronger than his, he was just an ordinary sacred king. This kind of situation had happened before. You are very powerful, so powerful that I feel threatened. This is extremely rare for a mere great saint like you. Sacred King Hun Tian gradually calmed down, and his voice became low. However, his eyes were filled with endless killing intent as he looked at Yi Xian. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have offended me. This is the way to your death. Sacred King Hun Tian narrowed his eyes and quietly raised his 5 fingers. The world within hundreds of millions of miles rumbled and trembled as the chaotic laws of heaven and earth raged. If I were you, I wouldn't talk so much nonsense, Yi Xian said indifferently. He didn't underestimate Sacred King Hun Tian. After all, Sacred King Hun Tian was a whole realm higher than him. However, in Yi Xian's opinion, Sacred King Hun Tian was only talking so much nonsense to save his face. If he were Sacred King Hun Tian, he would have killed him directly. That was the most decisive and direct method. Sacred King Hun Tian was unmoved by Yi Xian's mockery. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Do you know why my nickname is Hun Tian?" Without waiting for Yi Xian to speak, Sacred King Hun Tian looked up at the sky and sighed. The so-called Hun Tian is able to deceive the chaotic laws of heaven and create a world. In this world, I am the heaven and I am the earth. Everything will be under my control, and everything will bow down to this world. This is also a unique ability of the Sacred King realm. Yi Xian, you are too weak. You are so weak that you don't understand the terror of the Sacred King realm. You should feel honored that you can make me use my source world today. Rumble. Sacred King Hun Tian whispered as the chaotic laws of heaven wrapped around his body. He flipped his hand and a golden bell appeared. Then, the bell appeared between heaven and earth. This bell is called Hun Tian. It is my strongest spirit treasure. It nurtures the world I created. Today, I will bury you in my Hun Tian world. Suppress. Sacred King Hun Tian roared, and the golden bell swayed in the sky, emitting an unimaginable chaotic aura that instantly covered millions of miles of heaven and earth. Rumble. Heaven and earth were changed, and all things were covered in dust. When the golden bell covered millions of miles of the world, the appearance of this world changed, turning into a vast and desolate world. Celestial world. Sacred King Hun Tian actually used his Hun Tian world. The 9-tailed celestial fox and old devil Netherworld roared, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Lin Miaofa and Lin Miaoxian's faces were deathly pale. The so-called opening of a world was a method unique to Saint Kings. In the world opened by a Saint King, he was a supreme existence and no one could defeat him. This was the true terror of a Saint King. Of course, this was merely a way of saying that the Saint King was terrifying, but if someone could burst forth with enough power to destroy this world, they would naturally be able to destroy the mystical power that the Saint King had created. Unfortunately, those who could succeed were extremely rare. Apart from those terrifying battle constitutions, there had never been anyone who could break through the world created by Saint Kings. Rumble. Suddenly, Sacred King Hun Tian rose into the sky and stood above the clouds. He looked down at Yi Xian from the clouds, his body radiating an unimaginable chaotic power. This was the power of a Saint King, the power of a world. In the world that he had created, he was worthy of being called the supreme expert, and all things had to bow at his feet. Kneel. Sacred King Hun Tian said majestically, and the power of his world pressed down on Yi Xian. Yi Xian's face was solemn, and infinite power erupted from his body. However, his spine was slightly bent, and beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. Submit. Rumble. Sacred King Hun Tian pressed down with his finger, and the power of his world gathered into a giant finger that pressed down on Yi Xian. You think you can do it? Yi Xian's eyes were crimson red as he coldly roared. He raised both of his arms and brazenly blocked the giant finger. However, both of his feet sank into the ground and his slightly curved spine was once again pressed down by 3 points. Gu, Ge, Ge. The power of his world was too terrifying. This was the world created by Sacred King Hun Tian, and it fully displayed the power of a saint king. Yi Xian's knees began to bend, as if he was really going to kneel before Sacred King Hun Tian. Fortunately, Yi Xian's body was too perfect. Even in the face of the suppression of the world's power, he still managed to hold on. Only half of his body sank into the ground, and his bones cracked. It had to be said that the Saint King realm was indeed terrifying. When Sacred King Hun Tian used the world he had created, it directly brought great calamity to Yi Xian. Stubborn. Sacred King Hun Tian roared angrily as he looked at Yi Xian's stubborn appearance. However, if one observed carefully, they would notice that there was great fear in his eyes. The so-called Saint Monarch's world was a terrifying technique that was unique to Saint Monarchs. It contained unimaginable power. However, this technique consumed a lot of cultivation. Sacred King Hun Tian was only a junior Saint King, so he could only support this world for 15 minutes at most. After 15 minutes, he would fall into a weakened state. At that time, with Yi Xian's terrifying combat strength, he would be in great danger. Therefore, Saint King Hun Tian had to kill Yi Xian before the time it takes for an incense stick to burn past. Die! Sacred King Hun Tian roared angrily. He turned into a sky full of sword rays and shot toward Yi Xian. There were hundreds of millions of sword rays, and they filled the world and nurtured a terrifying amount of world power. Clang! 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 Hundreds of millions of sword rays were terrifying. This was a Saint King's technique that contained world power. When these sword rays bombarded Yi Xian's body, they directly sent him flying. It was also at this moment that the giant finger pressing down on Yi Xian's head came crashing down. The terrifying world power suppressed his body. Bang! Yi Xian's body slammed into the ground, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was cracking inch by inch. Although these wounds were not big, they had seriously injured his body. How is this possible? Sacred King Hun Tian was shocked when he saw that Yi Xian had only suffered some minor injuries. One had to know that even a junior Saint King would suffer a terrifying death if they were trapped in the world he had created. However, his opponent was only a great saint, and he had only suffered some minor injuries. The Saint Monarch world is really interesting. Yi Xian slowly crawled up from the ground. His face was gloomy as he ruthlessly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The Nirvana battle armor quietly covered his body. Die! Sacred King Hun Tian's face was cold as he once again used world power. This time, heavenly lightning, earthly fire, occult ice, and baleful ghosts all attacked Yi Xian with all-encompassing killing intent. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was prepared this time. With the Nirvana battle armor, he allowed these terrifying attacks to land on his body. Bang! 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 Yi Xian was forced to retreat again and again. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Although the Nirvana battle armor could help him block external attacks, the terrifying power of the Nirvana battle armor still affected his internal organs. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't want to dodge, but that he couldn't. In the Saint Monarch world, Yi Xian felt like he had sunk into a quagmire. Even circulating his cultivation base was extremely slow. This was also why he didn't dodge. How is this possible? How is this possible? Sacred King Hun Tian's face was extremely pale as he looked at Yi Xian standing in the desolate land. He frantically used world power, but he still couldn't truly kill Yi Xian. Crack! Suddenly, a crack appeared in the sky. Then, like a chain reaction, it began to spread in all directions. Not good, time's almost up. Sacred King Hun Tian trembled as he whispered. His eyes were filled with great panic. Buzz! Sacred King Hun Tian's face was extremely purple. He glared hatefully at Yi Xian and waved his hand to disperse the world. The golden bell returned to his hand, and everyone returned to the real world. Yi Xian, you're lucky today. I'll definitely take your dog life in the future. Sacred King Hun Tian roared hatefully. However, the fear in his eyes was extremely strong. He turned into a streak of light and shot into the distance. Want to run? Did you ask for my permission? Yi Xian roared coldly. He flipped his hand and the heaven-destroying halberd appeared. He instantly chased after Sacred King Hun Tian. Is he crazy? The 9 heavenly foxes screamed in horror. Sacred King Hun Tian had already retreated, but Yi Xian still dared to chase after him. Was he tired of living? Crazy, he must be crazy, old demon Yuming trembled as he muttered. Sister, what should we do? Lin Miaoxian looked at Lin Miaofa with fear as she watched Yi Xian chase after Sacred King Hun Tian disappear. Let's go back to Miaofa Kingdom first, Lin Miaofa said with a trembling voice. Then, she called out to Lin Miaoxian and the two of them returned to Miaofa Kingdom. However, the two girls didn't know that Yi Xian's name had spread throughout the Great Southern Dou territory. He had truly become a notorious figure in the Great Southern Dou territory. Chapter 11:15. The sky exploded, and killing intent filled the sky. 2 figures, one in front and one behind, exuded an unimaginably terrifying aura as they chased each other in the boundless sky. Junior, don't be so arrogant. Sacred King Hun Tian fled frantically in the sky, but his face was extremely pale, and there was a hint of shame and anger in his eyes. Die for me. The halberd soared through the sky, slaughtering everything in its path. Yi Xian crazily chased after him, and when the halberd slashed out, the sky exploded. The terrifying holy energy shot straight towards Holy King Hun Tian. Clang! Sacred King Hun Tian summoned a spirit treasure to block in a hurry, and he used the huge force of Yi Xian's attack to speed up his escape. However, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Obviously, Yi Xian's attack had made him suffer. How could he be so strong? How could he be so strong? Sacred King Hun Tian's heart was in turmoil. He could not understand this strange thing at all. His opponent was clearly only a great saint, so how could his combat strength be so terrifying? It was not a battle constitution, nor was it a member of the Panga clan, but Yi Xian's combat strength simply shocked Sacred King Hun Tian. He felt that Yi Xian was a real monster. Escaping from the Southern Dipper meeting was a great humiliation for Sacred King Hun Tian, but he had to escape. After using the celestial world, he would fall into a weakened state, and he would definitely suffer a great calamity when facing Yi Xian. Originally, Sacred King Hun Tian thought that he was a saint king, and he had just used the celestial world, so Yi Xian would definitely lose a lot of his cultivation to resist the celestial world. Yi Xian would definitely not dare to chase after him, but what Sacred King Hun Tian never expected was that Yi Xian would chase after him without any restraint. What scared Sacred King Hun Tian the most was that Yi Xian's cultivation seemed to be limitless. He didn't show any signs of weakness. Instead, he was frantically chasing after him. At this moment, Sacred King Hun Tian was extremely weak and could only use half of his cultivation. Yi Xian's battle prowess was already terrifying, so Sacred King Hun Tian had no choice but to flee. It was a great humiliation for a saint king to be hunted down by a supreme saint. Saint King Hun Tian would become the biggest joke in the Southern Dou realm. Saint King Hun Tian wanted nothing more than to cut Yi Xian into 1,000 pieces, but the current situation was extremely unfavorable to him. He had to quickly recover his cultivation before he could fight Yi Xian again. Blood Spirit Sky Escape. Bang! Sacred King Hun Tian let out a furious roar as brilliant blood energy erupted from his body. His speed doubled as he shot toward the east. Let's see where you can run to. Yi Xian let out a cruel roar as he activated his primordial spirit void to the extreme. His entire body shuttled through the void as he chased after Sacred King Hun Tian. In fact, it was very easy for Yi Xian to stop Sacred King Hun Tian. He didn't need to expend so much effort. He could stop Sacred King Hun Tian in an instant as long as he used the power of time and space. The power of time and space was mysterious and unfathomable. It was one of the 12 most powerful forces in the chaotic world and could definitely be ranked in the top 5. However, Yi Xian didn't want to use it because he was now in the chaotic world. If he used the power of time and space to stop Sacred King Hun Tian, the secret of his control over the power of time and space would be exposed. The power of time and space was the symbol of the Temple of Time and Space. If the people of the Temple of Time and Space found out, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble for Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian wouldn't use the power of time and space unless it was a critical moment. It wasn't just the power of time and space, but also the power of nirvana of the Immortal Heaven Palace. Moreover, he had changed his appearance with the nirvana armor and heaven-destroying halberd to avoid being recognized. Yi Xian chased Sacred King Hun Tian from the sky to the ground, and from the ground to the sky. The mountains were collapsing and the earth was falling. The commotion caused by Sacred King Hun Tian's pursuit was getting bigger and bigger. Naturally, the creatures of the Great Nanda territory discovered this terrifying matter. Muyu Heavenly City covered an area of hundreds of millions of miles. It was an orthodoxy of the Great Nanda territory and was ruled by Supreme Saint Muyu. There were hundreds of millions of cultivators under his command. Supreme Saint Muyu was definitely an extremely powerful figure even among the Supreme Saints. Today was the day Supreme Saint Muyu came out of seclusion. His cultivation base was close to the Saint King realm. As long as he was given another 50 million years, he would definitely step into the Saint King realm. In the clouds of the 9 heavens, at the Qiangyao banquet, Supreme Saint Muyu was drinking and chatting with his friends. There were 3 Supreme Saints accompanying him. It was very lively for a moment. Suddenly, a figure covered in blood streaked across the sky. It was Supreme Saint Hun Tian, who was running away pathetically. "Quickly stop the people behind me!" Sacred King Hun Tian shouted anxiously. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth. He threw a milky white token at Supreme Saint Muyu and then fled into the distance again. Myriad Spirit Token. Supreme Saint Muyu looked at the token in his hand in horror. He recognized the origin of this token at first glance. His entire person became horrified. One should know that the Myriad Spirit Token was exclusive to the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. All orthodoxies had to listen to the token. This was also a rule set by the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Sacred King. That person was a sacred king. Supreme Saint Yunlan's expression changed drastically. Although Sacred King Hun Tian had rushed past in a hurry, he still released the aura of a sacred king. Sacred King Hun Tian. He's Sacred King Hun Tian. I've seen him in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace before. The 3 demon Supreme Saints screamed in horror. They recognized Sacred King Hun Tian at a glance. However, what made the 3 great saints bewildered was why Saint King Hun Tian was covered in blood. Who had severely injured him? Before the 3 Supreme Saints could react, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in the sky above Muyu Heavenly City. He narrowed his eyes and sensed Sacred King Hun Tian's aura. Who are you? Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Supreme Saint Muyu and the other 2 Supreme Saints soared into the sky and looked at Yi Xian with a frown. A hint of surprise flashed across their eyes. They dared not disobey the orders of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, let alone the orders of sacred King Hun Tian. However, the three supreme saints were shocked that the person who was chasing after sacred King Hun Tian was only a supreme saint. This puzzled them greatly. How could a mere supreme saint injure sacred King Hun Tian? Wasn't this ridiculous? Let's see where you can run to. Yi Xian's sacred soul was too powerful. He instantly sensed the direction sacred King Hun Tian had fled in and was about to continue his pursuit. Hold on, my friend. Suddenly, the three supreme saints blocked Yi Xian's path before Yi Xian could leave Muyu Heavenly City. Scram! Yi Xian roared. He did not have time to waste on these three. The heaven-destroying halberd slashed through the sky and turned into a shocking blade light that slashed toward the three supreme saints. Retreat! Yi Xian's combat strength was so terrifying that three supreme saints could not stop him. When Supreme Saint Muyu sensed the power of Yi Xian's attack, his face darkened instantly. He hurriedly dodged the terrifying attack. Chapter 11:16. Rumble. Yi Xian's attack was too terrifying. The Sky Splitter Blade Radiance roared down and split Muyu Sky City in half. Countless innocent creatures in the city died tragically under this attack. However, Yi Xian's delay allowed Saint King Hun Tian to escape from Yi Xian's detection. This made Yi Xian's expression instantly turn gloomy. He looked at the three great saints with a murderous look in his eyes. One had to know that Yi Xian was not only chasing after Saint King Hun Tian on impulse. First, he wanted to establish his authority in the Great Southern Territory. Most importantly, he wanted to devour Saint King Hun Tian's cultivation. Saint King Hun Tian was extremely weak at the moment. This was the best time to kill him. As long as he could kill him and devour his cultivation, Yi Xian's cultivation would greatly increase and save a lot of time. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Yi Xian naturally would not let it go. After all, a Saint King was not that easy to kill. It was rare for him to encounter such a good opportunity. How could he let Saint King Hun Tian go so easily? But now, he had lost Saint King Hun Tian just because of a delay of a few breaths. Fellow Taoist, aren't you a bit too ruthless? Great Saint Muyu's face was pale. Yi Xian's attack had killed tens of millions of creatures in the city. Even Muyu Sky City, which he had founded, had been split in half. This made him extremely angry. However, Great Sage Muyu didn't make a move immediately, because Yi Xian's attack just now was too fierce and gave him a sense of death. Furthermore, Saint King Hun Tian fled in a sorry state. This matter must be related to this mysterious person in front of him. However, Great Saint Muyu did not believe that Yi Xian could really defeat Saint King Hun Tian. Although he was wary of Yi Xian, he did not show any fear. You three bastards, you're courting death. Yi Xian was filled with anger after losing sacred monarch Hun Tian. The heaven-vanquishing halberd hummed loudly as it unleashed a power that could pierce through heaven and earth. Fellow Taoist, let's talk things out. Let us. The great sage of Cloud Mist was a woman, and an extremely beautiful one at that. She wanted to advise Yi Xian with the idea of peace as the most important thing. Puchi. Blood, fresh blood, beautiful fresh blood. The heaven-destroying halberd pierced through the Yunlan Grand Sage's chest and a bright red flower appeared on her clothes. Her entire body was flung into the air and she let out a piercing scream. Yunlan. Great Saint Muyu roared in rage. Great Saint Yunlan was his Taoist partner. Now, her chest had been pierced through by the halberd. This made Great Saint Muyu's eyes turn red as he charged madly towards Yi Xian. Send you on your way. Yi Xian's combat power was too terrifying and the heaven-destroying halberd was the #1 killing weapon in all of history. Although Saintess Yunlan was hanging on the heaven-destroying halberd, this did not stop Yi Xian from using it to kill Great Saint Muyu. Puff! Now that Yi Xian had unleashed his full combat power, how could Great Saint Mu Yu withstand it? When Yi Xian struck, the entire world froze. The cold halberd ruthlessly pierced through Great Saint Mu Yu's heart and he was flung into the air by the heaven-destroying halberd. Mu Yu? The three-demon grand sage trembled and roared. When he saw the heaven-destroying halberd piercing through Mu Yu and Yun Lan's bodies and hanging on the heaven-destroying halberd, he was extremely terrified. Run! The three-demon grand sage's mind went blank. At this moment, he only wanted to escape from this place because Yi Xian was too terrifying. In an instant, he had seriously injured two great saints. Boom! The three-demon grand sage soared into the sky and fled into the distance. However, before he could escape, Yi Xian's cruel and cold voice rang out. Stellar transposition. The sun and moon were reversed and heaven and earth were reversed. The three-demon grand sage only felt a terrifying suction force behind him and he was instantly pulled back. Puff! Yi Xian smiled cruelly and his 5 fingers suddenly pierced through the three-demon grand sage's heart. A bloody demon heart was pulled out by Yi Xian. Then, as the three-demon grand sage screamed in agony, Yi Xian crushed the demon heart in his hand. Ah! The demon heart was crushed by Yi Xian. Witnessing this terrifying scene, the three-demon grand sage screamed in agony. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian grabbed him by the neck and pierced through his chest with the halberd. The heavens were speechless and all living things trembled. At this moment, the heaven-destroying halberd had pierced through the three-demon grand sages. Large amounts of blood flowed out of their bodies and they all fainted. The three-demon grand sages did not die immediately because they were great sages. If it were anyone else, they would have died under the heaven-destroying halberd. At this moment, Yi Xian carried the heaven-destroying halberd on his shoulder and the three-demon grand sages hanging behind him. Yi Xian looked down at Muyu Sky City below him with a cruel look in his eyes. Han Tian, don't think that you can escape. Yi Xian murmured cruelly. Rumble. Suddenly, Yi Xian stretched out his 5 fingers and formed a giant palm in the sky. The aura that could destroy all things spread out and slammed down towards Muyu Tian City with a mighty force that could suppress all things. No. Oh my God. I don't want to die. Demon. You're a demon. There were hundreds of millions of living things in Muyu Sky City. There were mortals and cultivators among them. Faced with Yi Xian's merciless attack, all kinds of terrified screams could be heard. Bang! It was as if the millstone of slaughter was smashing down and the lament of the dead was playing. When the giant palm landed on Muyu Sky City was instantly reduced to ashes. Hundreds of millions of living things exploded into a bloody mist. Only their heads were left behind. Their shrill screams reverberated between heaven and earth. Withering souls of the dead. Yi Xian roared cruelly. He pointed out a finger and hundreds of millions of living things' heads flew towards Yi Xian. The rolling blood qi gathered into a sea of blood and rushed towards Yi Xian. Rumble. The sea of blood churned and hundreds of millions of heads covered the sky. Yi Xian carried the heaven-destroying halberd on his shoulder and the 3 great sages' bloody bodies hanging behind him. He stood in the sea of blood and looked around disdainfully. With the sea of blood as the guide and the souls of the dead as the contract, go. Yi Xian pointed out a finger and a drop of Saint King Han Tian's blood fused into the sea of blood. The sea of blood churned and hundreds of millions of heads screamed miserably. The ghostly wails and howls could make one saint's soul tremble. Rumble. The withering souls of the dead was extremely vicious. This was a technique created by Yi Xian. It was formed by the blood qi of hundreds of millions of living things. Even if Saint King Han Tian escaped into the starry sky, Yi Xian could still find him. Whoosh, the sea of blood surged and hundreds of millions of heads screamed miserably. Yi Xian stood in the middle of the sea of blood. A sea of blood appeared under his feet and carried him towards the distance. Yi Xian carried the heaven-destroying souls of the dead with the heaven-destroying halberd on his shoulder and the three great sages' bloody bodies hanging behind him. Yi Xian moved forward with the withering souls of the dead. Its ferocious might was terrifying to the extreme. Chapter 11:17. The entire world was shocked and all creatures were terrified. A shocking piece of news quickly spread across the southern Dipper region. A terrifying existence carried three great saint corpses on his shoulders and bathed in a sea of blood. Everywhere he went, everything died. His ferocious aura intimidated all creatures. This news quickly spread throughout the entire southern Dipper region in just 3 short years. Countless orthodoxies sent people to investigate. As the saying goes, one wave after another. When the orthodoxies found out about Yi Xian's origins and gradually learned about Yi Xian's deeds, the southern Dipper region was completely shaken. The southern Dipper small meeting killed great sages and killed saint kings from hundreds of millions of miles away. Everywhere they passed, everything was destroyed. The great sages were killed as easily as chopping vegetables. The peerless madman Yi Xian appeared out of nowhere. This person claimed to be a saint king from 10,000 years ago. Now that he reappeared in the southern Dipper region, he didn't hesitate to offend the 10,000 Spirit Palace. He was frantically searching for Saint King Hun Tian's whereabouts. Great saints were terrified and saint kings were shocked. When this news spread across the southern Dipper region, countless orthodoxies sent people to find Yi Xian. They wanted to see what kind of person Yi Xian was. At the same time, Southern Dipper region, Heaven Mending Pavilion. Heaven Mending Pavilion was a branch of the Heaven Mending sect. It was an extremely terrifying existence in the entire Southern Dipper region. Outside of the orthodoxies created by the top 10, the Heaven Mending sect was definitely a colossal existence. What? Yi Xian? The Heaven Mending Pavilion Lord, who was guarding the Southern Dipper region, slightly changed his expression. He was listening to the disciple in front of him report about Yi Xian. Correct, this person is indeed Yi Xian. Legend has it that he is a saint king from 100 million years ago. His cultivation can even fight across a realm. The disciple quickly reported. I am not talking about his cultivation, but his name. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Lord said solemnly. His eyes flickered with astonishment. One had to know that the Heaven Mending sect Lord had sent an oral order to find someone named Yi Xian. To be able to make the sect Lord personally send an oral order proved that Yi Xian's identity was not ordinary. You can leave now. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Lord ordered his disciple to leave. Then, he quickly cast a bright spell and a mirror image appeared in front of him. Sect Lord, I have found the Heaven Mending of Heaven. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Lord appeared in the mirror image of the Heaven Mending of Heaven mending Heaven's chi of Heaven Mending of Heaven. Sect Master Butian's back was straight and straight. Even though he was in the Great Central Region, just the aura that leaked out from the mirror image made Pavilion Master Butian's heart tremble. Don't look at how Sect Master Butian was like a humble little old man in front of Lu Bai. However, in front of Pavilion Master Butian, his entire being was deep and quiet, giving off an indescribably terrifying aura. He was a peerless figure in the immortal realm. Even in the chaotic world, he was also a top existence. Wherever Sect Master Butian went, all creatures had to bow their heads. Good. Sect Master Butian said indifferently. However, his eyes were deep and terrifying. A clone unexpectedly walked out from the mirror image. An indescribably terrifying aura made Sect Master Butian kneel at its feet and tremble. Yi Xian. Let this Sect Master see what kind of person you are to make Lu Bai miss you so much. Terrifying. It was terrifying to the extreme. The so-called mirror image was a communication spell. It could show the image and voice of others. But the Heaven Mending sect Lord had just sent out a doppelganger and walked out of the mirror image alive. The 5 regions of chaos were vast and boundless. Even a supreme saint would need 100,000 years to travel from the central region to the southern Dipper region. However, Sect Master Butian was able to cross this barrier. Just this ability alone was terrifying to the extreme. And don't forget, this was only a doppelganger of the heaven-mending sect lord, not his real body. Then how terrifying was the heaven-mending sect lord's real cultivation? Buzz! The heaven-mending sect lord took a step and suddenly disappeared. The heaven-mending pavilion lord wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Obviously, talking to the heaven-mending sect lord had made him feel great pressure. On the other side. Heaven and earth, a sea of blood, hundreds of millions of heads. Terrifying power filled the sky and earth. Saint King Hun Tian was fleeing frantically. Yi Xian was chasing after him. Yi Xian, don't go too far. Saint King Hun Tian's eyes were bloodshot. He roared at Yi Xian as he fled frantically. But what greeted him was a merciless suppression spell. Bang! A fist came. Saint King Hun Tian dodged in a hurry, but he was still hit by the aftershock. He staggered and fled frantically again. No one can escape from me when I want to kill. Yi Xian smiled ferociously and chased after Saint King Hun Tian again. Damn it! Damn it! Being chased by a great sage made Saint King Hun Tian go mad with hatred, and he felt extremely aggrieved in his heart. He really couldn't understand why Yi Xian was still able to find him even though he'd already gotten rid of him. Holy King Hun Tian was even more suspicious. Yi Xian had been chasing after him for a full 10 years, so this news would definitely be sent back to the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. Why hadn't the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace come to his rescue? Go to hell. Suddenly, Yi Xian's halberd soared into the sky, and a cruel and excited smile appeared on his face. In the end, he blocked Saint King Hun Tian's path. When he slashed out with his halberd, he poured all of his cultivation into it, and the entire world was split apart by him. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Saint King Hun Tian here. My life is over. Saint King Hun Tian roared in horror. He was extremely weak at the moment. He could only use 30% of his cultivation. He couldn't resist Yi Xian's fatal attack. Buzz! All of a sudden. Just when Saint King Hun Tian felt that he was going to die in Yi Xian's hands, the world suddenly froze. An illusory figure quietly walked over from the horizon. The law of primal chaos fell silent and the spirit qi in the sky dissipated. Only this figure became a towering existence, as if everything was nothing but dust in front of him. It was also because of this person's appearance that Yi Xian's fatal attack paused for a moment. Saint King Hun Tian quickly seized this chance and desperately used the blood spirit heavenly escape to escape into the distance again. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian didn't chase after him. It wasn't that he didn't want to chase, but he couldn't at the moment because there was a pair of eyes looking at him from behind. Although the other party didn't show any killing intent, just this pair of eyes made his scalp tingle and his heart tremble. Senior, who are you? Terrifying, extremely terrifying. Yi Xian had cultivated for millions of years and the most powerful person he had ever seen was his future self. The figure standing behind him was the second person who made his heart tremble. Yi Xian stiffly turned around. The monstrous waves of blood stopped moving around him. The hundreds of millions of heads hanging behind him also quieted down, no longer making any mournful sounds. Yi Xian couldn't see clearly, couldn't see through, and didn't know what this person looked like. This was the most intuitive feeling Sect Master Butian gave Yi Xian. Although Sect Master Butian had only sent out a clone, his spiritual will existed in it. He ignored Yi Xian's question and squinted his eyes to size up Yi Xian. Round body, flawless cultivation. You can pass the primal chaos sacred tribulation with a mortal body and cultivate to such a level. You are indeed a stunning talent. Chapter 11:18 Sect Master Bu Tian commented on Yi Xian's cultivation, but he slowly shook his head and said, "What a pity, what a pity. Although your physical body has been cultivated to perfection, it's only a mortal body. If you had a mutated battle body, you might have the qualifications to be my disciple. Even if you have an ordinary battle body, I can still accept you as my disciple on account of Lu Bai. But in the end, a mortal body is only a mortal body. The three realms of creation are your greatest limits. In the end, you will only be a speck of dust in the primal chaos world." Sect Master Bu Tian muttered in a low voice. It was unknown if he was speaking to himself or Yi Xian. "Brother Bai?" Hearing Bu Tian's words, Yi Xian's expression changed. He said, "Do you know where Lu Bai is?" "So what if I do?" Bu Tian frowned and said impatiently. He was no longer interested in Yi Xian, and he was extremely disappointed in Yi Xian. According to Bu Tian's original plan, the person who was valued by Lu Bai must be a rare genius, even if he was not as good as Lu Bai. However, after seeing Yi Xian, Bu Tian was greatly disappointed. Yi Xian was just an ordinary mortal body. Although he had cultivated his supreme saint cultivation to perfection, a mortal body was still a mortal body. The greatest achievement he could achieve was the creation and transformation realms. Perhaps in the eyes of others, the creation and transformation realms were peerless figures in the chaotic world. However, in Bu Tian's eyes, those who had not reached the immortal realm were just ants. "Senior, please take me to see him. I have been looking for him for a long time." Although Yi Xian was not satisfied with Bu Tian's attitude, Bu Tian was an existence that he could not imagine. In front of a real expert, he could only endure for the time being. "It doesn't matter whether you see him or not. I came to see you today to tell you something," Bu Tian said lightly. "What is it?" After experiencing the initial throbbing, Yi Xian finally calmed down. He instantly felt that this mysterious person in front of him seemed to have some prejudice against him that he didn't know about. "Yi Xian, have you heard of this saying?" Sect Master Bu Tian asked. "What words?" Yi Xian's expression gradually darkened. "How can the light of a firefly compete with the brilliance of the moon?" Sect Master Bu Tian said indifferently. "What are you trying to say?" Yi Xian's eyes were filled with malice. He didn't even bother to address the mysterious person as senior, because he could already sense the disdain this mysterious person had for him. "Yi Xian, I hope you know your limits. You're just a mortal. You can only reach the creation, and transformation realms. You'll never reach the immortal realm. But Lu Bai is different. He's the #1 genius of all ages. His world is too vast. He'll become the next strongest of all ages in the next Yuanhui. He'll truly control the 11th Yuanhui. Moreover, he might even become one of the top 3 existences." Sect Master Bu Tian paused here. He then looked at Yi Xian and said in a deep voice, "Perhaps you don't know what it means to be the strongest of all ages, but I can tell you right now that it's a realm you'll never reach. It's a realm you need to look up to." "What does what you're saying have to do with me?" Yi Xian said with a cold expression. Seeing Yi Xian's stubborn appearance, Sect Master Bu Tian said coldly, "I just want you to understand that you and Lu Bai don't belong to the same world. He has his own vast sky while you're just a speck of dust in the chaotic world. This Sect Master will put it bluntly. You're not qualified to be Lu Bai's friend. Even this Sect Master isn't qualified. The only people who can be his friends are the 10 strongest of all ages. Right now, Lu Bai is in a crucial period of cultivation, but he's always thinking about you. In this Sect Master's opinion, this is an extremely bad thing. Although he's the #1 genius of all ages, he still needs to focus on his cultivation. That's why this Sect Master has come to see you today in hopes that you can write a letter to him so that he can focus on his cultivation. As for you, Yi Xian, don't ever see him again. Of course, as compensation, this Sect Master will give you a heaven-mending pill. This pill can directly allow you to enter the Saint King realm and save you tens of millions of years of cultivation. Sect Master Butian said slowly. His voice was extremely indifferent, and he looked like he was giving orders. Sect Master Butian believed that Yi Xian wouldn't refuse him. Not only because the heaven-mending pill could allow Yi Xian to enter the Saint King realm, but also because he was an immortal realm expert and the Sect Master Butian. No one dared to refuse his orders. At this moment, Yi Xian had completely calmed down. After listening to Sect Master Butian's description, he could roughly guess that Lu Bai wasn't in any danger and should be cultivating in this mysterious person's orthodoxy. Wang. A jade slip appeared in Yi Xian's hand. He quickly wrote a letter on the jade slip. The general content of the letter was that he was fine and that Lu Bai didn't need to worry about him. He also asked Lu Bai to focus on his cultivation. Qi. After Yi Xian finished writing the letter, he casually tossed the jade slip to Sect Master Butian. Sect Master Butian caught it and looked at it first. A satisfied look appeared in his eyes. You're worth teaching. You've done well. Sect Master Butian smiled. Everything was going according to his plan. With a flip of his hand, he casually tossed a dazzling pill at Yi Xian as if he was giving alms to a beggar. The heaven-mending pill is a spiritual item of the chaos and contains the laws of the universe. You will be able to enter the Saint King plane after consuming this pill. If you have enough comprehension, it is not impossible for you to become a nine-heaven Saint King. Sect Master Butian waved his hand and slowly walked away. Wait. Suddenly, before Sect Master Butian could leave, the sound of something shooting through the air rang out behind him. Sect Master Butian was stunned. He turned around and caught the item that was flying at him. The heaven-mending pill. It was the heaven-mending pill that Sect Master Butian had tossed to Yi Xian. Sect Master Butian was confused. He raised his head to look at Yi Xian, but he saw that Yi Xian was also staring at him coldly. I wrote this letter to Brother Bai Yi because I didn't want him to delay his cultivation because of me. As for your conditions, I never agreed to them, so I don't care about the heaven-mending pill, Yi Xian said coldly. Junior, you've gone too far. Sect Master Butian's face changed. Although he was only a clone, the power it possessed was terrifying to the extreme. It immediately pressed down on Yi Xian. Thump. 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 It was as if an ancient star had crashed into him, as if the heavens were pressing down. Facing the might of Sect Master Butian, Yi Xian took a few steps back. His face flushed red, and the blood in his body violently surged. Junior, if it weren't for Lu Bai, how could you have the right to speak to me? Sect Master Butian berated sternly. I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know who you are right now. However, I, Yi Xian, will remember the contempt and humiliation you've given me today. I will definitely return it all in the future, Yi Xian said with bloodshot eyes. How dare you? Sect Master Butian roared out. Even the wind and clouds shattered. His terrifying power was simply unbearable to look at. Junior, I've kindly advised you and even granted you a great opportunity, yet you dare to be disrespectful to me? With your mortal body, you can only cultivate to the 3 realms of creation at most. You're not worthy of being Lu Bai's friend, Sect Master Butian roared out. There's a saying among mortals, I wonder if you've heard of it before. Yi Xian showed no fear in the face of Sect Master Butian's terrifying power. Instead, he roared back at him. Life is full of ups and downs. Don't look down on me because I'm poor. So what if you have a mortal body? So what if you have a battle constitution? How do you know that I, Yi Xian, can't become the strongest across the ages with a mortal body? Could it be that the position of the strongest across the ages was decided by you? You've humiliated me, relied on me, and looked down on me. One day, I'll make you look up to me and kneel before my feet. You'll regret what you've done today. Ha ha ha, With just you. Sect Master Butian roared with laughter, but his smile gradually disappeared. His voice was extremely cold as he said, "If I want to kill you right now, I can do so with a flick of my finger." How dare an ant like you speak so arrogantly? You won't kill me because you won't be able to answer to Lu Bai if you kill me. I hope you remember what I've said today. One day, you'll regret what you've said today. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and strode off into the distance. Sect Master Butian's face was ashen. He slightly raised his hand, but in the end, he helplessly lowered it and let out a helpless sigh. It was just as Yi Xian had said. He didn't dare to kill Yi Xian. If he did, then Lu Bai would find out sooner or later. At that time, it would bring a great disaster to the heaven-mending sect. Fine, this sect master will see just how far an ant like you can go. Let's see if I'll kneel before your feet in the future and regret what I've said today. Sect Master Butian said with disdain. I've revived from death, I've risen from the ashes. Countless tribulations, tens of thousands of disasters, a surging sea of blood. I, Yi Xian, have walked on mountains of corpses and bones. When have I ever felt the slightest bit of fear? Just wait, just wait. It won't be long, it won't be long at all. With a single thought, all rivers and mountains would be filled with emotions. With a single thought, the vast sea would turn into mulberry fields without a heart. In the struggle for the great Tao, one would fall behind if they didn't advance. Yi Xian had never needed to boast, because he would definitely walk the path of the strongest across the ages. He would make all those who looked down on him feel regret. After hearing Yi Xian's words and seeing Yi Xian's figure disappear into the distance, Sect Master Butian's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt a trace of regret. This feeling came out of nowhere, and it made him frown even more. He was extremely shocked as to why he would have such an absurd feeling. This person. Sect Master Butian murmured to himself. Then, he quickly shook his head to dispel this trace of regret. He laughed self-deprecatingly. He's only an insignificant mortal who can only reach the creation, and transformation realms. Why should I bicker with a junior over these words? After dispelling this uneasiness, Sect Master Butian took the jade slip from Yi Xian and drifted away. But was it really like what Butian thought? Was Yi Xian really just a speck of dust in the chaotic world? No one could give an answer to this because it would take time to find out. However, Yi Xian had deeply remembered what happened today. Where would he go in the future? Chapter 11-19. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. A 9-tiered platform is built from the ground, and a thick tree is built from the dust. This sentence meant that if one wanted to reach a goal, they had to start from little by little. Nothing could be accomplished overnight. Yi Xian's eyes were deep. He did not know who that person was, but he knew that he had to move forward bravely until he reached the peak. The contempt and disdain of others would not affect Yi Xian. Instead, it would become his greatest motivation until he reached the peak. Those who once looked down on him would look up to him. Although Yi Xian was angry, he knew his limits. The other party was stronger than him, so he did not need to say so much. Weakness was an original sin. Fortunately, Yi Xian was very glad about one thing. According to the mysterious person, Lu Bai was not in any danger. Instead, he was focused on cultivating. This could be considered to have resolved one of Yi Xian's worries. Weakness is an original sin. Only by becoming strong can one be eternal, Yi Xian said to himself in a deep voice as a look of determination flashed across his eyes. Rice had to be eaten one bite at a time, and roads had to be walked one step at a time. Yi Xian understood this principle very well, but Yi Xian wanted to shorten this process as quickly as possible. Although the heaven-mending pill is good, it's a pity that my self-esteem won't allow me to accept it. Even without it, I'll still step into the Saint King realm very quickly. Yi Xian coldly whispered. He already had a plan in mind. Saint King Hun Tian let you escape with your life. Unfortunately, your fate has long been sealed. You will die at my hands. Rumble. The sea of blood roared and surged. Yi Xian sensed Saint King Hun Tian's aura again. After 3 breaths, he suddenly shot towards the east. If Yi Xian wanted to kill someone, no one had ever been able to escape from his hands, not even Saint King Hun Tian. This was because he was Yi Xian's food for him to enter the Saint King realm. How could Yi Xian let this person go so easily? Yi Xian's principle had always been to take advantage of someone's weakness. Yi Xian wouldn't let go of such a rare opportunity. On the other side, Sacred King Hun Tian was drenched in blood as he frantically fled towards the east. He would occasionally look back to observe what was happening behind him, fearing that Yi Xian would chase after him again. Fortunately, Sect Master Butian's appearance had coincidentally saved his life. Yi Xian had wasted quite a bit of time and had not immediately caught up to him. This kid is too strange. How did he find me? Sacred King Hun Tian muttered as he fled. A vast mountain range vaguely appeared in front of him, and within the clouds, there was a palace that was emitting a sacred light. The holy land of Taichu is about to arrive. Even if that kid can still find me, he will definitely die at the hands of Great Spirit Saint King. But why hasn't the Thousand Spirit Palace done anything? Don't they know that I'm being chased by this bastard? Sacred King Hun Tian's expression was uncertain. He had been chased by Yi Xian for 10 years and had no time to heal his wounds. Why hadn't the Thousand Spirit Palace sent anyone to rescue him after the 2 of them had caused such a big commotion? In fact, Sacred King Hun Tian had misunderstood. Not only had the Thousand Spirit Palace not done anything, but the other transcendental orthodoxies had also not done anything. This matter had a lot to do with Sect Master Butian. Although Sect Master Butian's avatar had arrived in the Great Southern Dou territory, the other transcendental orthodoxies had naturally sensed Sect Master Butian's aura. At this moment, all their attention was focused on Butian Pavilion in the Great Southern Dou territory. How could they have the time to care about Sacred King Hun Tian? Perhaps Saint Kings were extraordinary existences in the Great Southern Dou territory, and Sacred King Hun Tian was a member of the Thousand Spirit Palace. However, compared to Sect Master Butian's arrival, he was insignificant. Although Sect Master Butian had coincidentally saved Holy King Hun Tian's life, he'd also indirectly helped Yi Xian avoid a lot of trouble. Because his arrival had caused the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace and the other supreme orthodoxies to be extremely fearful, it had also diverted the attention of these orthodoxies, giving Yi Xian plenty of time to chase after Holy King Hun Tian. Forget it. Let's enter the holy land of Taichu first. If that kid can still find me, I'll make sure he doesn't return alive, Sacred King Hun Tian muttered gloomily. His figure sped up again as he shot toward the holy land of Taichu. The blood sea of heaven and earth blotted out the sun. The withering souls of the dead was an extremely vicious secret technique created by Yi Xian himself. This technique gathered the essence of hundreds of millions of blood souls. There was no way Sacred King Hun Tian could escape from Yi Xian's pursuit. Rumble. The heavens and earth shook as the blood sea surged. Yi Xian stepped on the blood sea and arrived. Looking ahead, he saw a series of mountains and a palace looming in the mist. The holy land of Taichu. A giant peak that pierced the sky came into Yi Xian's view. 4 words were engraved on the mottled mountain, and Yi Xian read them out loud. Escaped into the holy land of Taichu. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If Yi Xian remembered correctly, the Green Sea Great Saint he had killed before was from the holy land of Taichu. Legend had it that the holy land of Taichu was overseen by an old Saint King. It was also because of this old Saint King that the holy land of Taichu was able to stand tall in the Great Southern Dou territory. To enter or not to enter? A difficult question was placed in front of Yi Xian. It was rumored that this old Saint King had lived for more than 100 million years and was a great Saint King 100 million years ago. After more than 100 million years, it was rumored that this old Saint King had stepped into the realm of a nine-heaven Saint King. Yi Xian might still dare to fight a great Saint King, but if he encountered a nine-heaven Saint King, who was 2 realms higher than Yi Xian, he would certainly not take the risk. However, Yi Xian was unwilling to leave just like that. One had to know that Saint King Hun Tian was in an extremely weak state. If he didn't kill him now, it would be difficult for him to have the chance in the future. Wealth comes from danger. It's not in my character to retreat. Yi Xian smiled evilly and rushed toward the holy land of Taichu with the blood sea of heaven and earth. In the holy land of Taichu. Hun Tian, is what you said true? Saint King Tailing was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He gave people a sense of immortality, but his eyes were extremely sharp and gave people a sense of dignity without being angry. Senior Tailing, it's true. This Yi Xian not only killed people of my 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, but also your disciple Qing Ming. Unfortunately, although I am a Saint King, I am no match for him. Now, only you can suppress this person, Saint King Hun Tian said. Yi Xian. A great saint. Saint King Tailing frowned and his eyes flashed slightly. Even when Saint King Hun Tian mentioned that his disciple was killed, his eyelids only trembled slightly and he didn't show any anger. As the saying went, the old man was cunning. A person who had lived for more than 100 million years was terrifyingly shrewd. Naturally, he didn't show his emotions. What kind of battle form does he have? Saint King Tailing didn't ponder for long. He looked up at Saint King Hun Tian, who was bathed in blood, and hesitated. Chapter 11:20. Saint King Hun Tian hurriedly replied, "It's not a battle constitution, just a mortal body." But his physical body is almost comparable to the Panga clan, and his techniques are extremely powerful. However, Saint King Hun Tian was embarrassed to be chased by a great sage, so he hurriedly explained, "Although this person's battle prowess is terrifying, I was careless. I used my sage monarch world first, allowing him to survive. That's why I'm currently in a weakened state. That's how I ended up being chased." Hun Tian, you were too careless. Although the Saint King's world is a technique unique to the Saint King realm, the only way to truly master it is to step into the 9th heaven Saint King realm. You can rest in the holy land of Taichu and return to the 10,000 spirit palace when you're better, Saint King Tailing said calmly. Saint King Hun Tian's expression changed when he heard Saint King Tailing's words. He said, "Senior, Qing Ming was killed. Aren't you going to avenge him? He was your only disciple. I'm old, and I'm no longer at my peak. I just want the holy land of Taichu to continue. Qing Ming was killed because he was not as good as others. Let's just let it go." After saying this, Saint King Tailing closed his eyes slightly, as if he had fallen into cultivation. Saint King Hun Tian was speechless when he saw Saint King Tailing's attitude. He knew that this old fox was too smart. It seemed that he could only wait until he recovered from his injuries. Rumble. Suddenly, a terrible sound of thunder came from the outside world. An extremely terrible wave was surging in, and a loud voice sounded in the holy land of Taichu. "I'm Yi Xian. I'm here to visit Saint King Tailing." Yi Xian. Saint King Hun Tian shuddered and looked outside in horror. He saw a sea of blood rising in the distant sky, and Yi Xian was striding toward the holy land of Taichu. Saint King Tailing opened his eyes again and frowned. He slowly got up and strode toward the outside world. Saint King Hun Tian's eyes moved, and he quickly followed Saint King Tailing. Outside. Rumble. In the blood sea of heaven and earth, hundreds of millions of heads, Yi Xian stood above the waves of the blood sea. He looked down at the holy land of Taichu and saw a large number of Taichu disciples gathering and looking at him in shock. "Little friend, you have arrived at the absolute beginning. This old man welcomes you. Little friend, please come down for a chat. The great spirit Saint King slowly walked over, and his voice entered Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian's expression changed when he saw Saint King Tailing. He almost turned around and left because Saint King Tailing was a nine-heaven Saint King. No, there is something wrong with this great spirit Saint King. Before Yi Xian could leave, he suddenly felt Tailing Saint King's aura fluctuating. Although this change was extremely subtle, Yi Xian had passed through the chaos holy tribulation. His saint's soul was extremely smooth and was extremely sensitive to auras. He could directly sense that something seemed to have happened to the great spirit Saint King. Moreover, a Saint King from the nine heavens didn't need to be so polite to him. He had killed the Saint King's disciple. If it were him, he would have attacked him long ago. Interesting. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a strange smile as he slowly walked down the mountain. I've long heard of the name of the great spirit Saint King. Today, I see that his reputation is indeed well-deserved. Yi Xian laughed, as if he was ignoring the existence of the holy King Hun Tian, and cupped his hands towards the great spirit Saint King. Little friend Yi, you flatter me. Compared to you, my cultivation is nothing. Little friend, let's talk inside the palace. Saint King Tailing smiled and was extremely humble. He made a gesture to Yi Xian and then led the way for Yi Xian. Senior, Saint King Hun Tian's face darkened. He wanted to say something, but before he could finish, Saint King Tailing interrupted him. He is a guest from afar. You don't need to say anything. After all, Saint King Tailing was an old Saint King. Now that Saint King Hun Tian was living under someone else's roof, he naturally had to listen to him. This made him keep his mouth shut and follow Saint King Tailing. Seeing this, Yi Xian's lips curved up slightly. He had suspected that Saint King Tailing was strange. Now that Saint King Tailing was acting like this, he was even more certain of his suspicions. Little friend, although the Taichu sacred land is only a small orthodoxy in the Nanda Great Domain, the Taichu mountains are made of chaotic star stones and contain a large amount of law of chaos. If you want, little friend, you can stay for a few more days. Saint King Tailing smiled as usual. He led Yi Xian into the Taichu palace while introducing the origin of the Taichu sacred land. Thank you, Saint King. The more polite Saint King Tailing was, the more careful Yi Xian was. This kind of old guy who didn't show his emotions on his face was the most difficult to deal with because you never knew when he would stab you in the back. Soon, the three of them entered the Taichu palace together. A black jade table was already set up, and there were all kinds of spirit fruits and wine on it. Please take a seat. Saint King Tailing smiled slightly. The three of them sat down together, but a strange atmosphere was also growing invisibly. As the saying goes, it's better to make enemies than to resolve them. I hope to be a peacemaker. Little friend, please let go of your hatred and give this old man some face. Saint King Tailing was the first to break the silence. Senior, you're right. Saint King Hun Tian's eyes moved, and he quickly agreed. Obviously, he was extremely weak now and couldn't be Yi Xian's opponent at all. As long as he could buy some time to recover, he was naturally very happy. As the saying goes, it's not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Once he recovers from his injuries, he'll definitely make Yi Xian die without a burial ground. Little friend Yi, this old man offers you a toast. Drink this wine, and your grudge with Hun Tian will be resolved. Saint King Tailing raised his cup to Yi Xian. Tap. 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 Yi Xian's 5 fingers tapped on the table, making rhythmic sounds. The corner of his mouth curled up in a playful smile. He was sizing up Saint King Tailing, and he didn't have the intention to pick up the cup on the table. Even though Saint King Tailing was an old fox, he was also terrifyingly scheming. At this moment, he was slightly embarrassed. Fortunately, Saint King Tailing quickly recovered and put down the cup. He said in a low voice, "Little friend, it seems that you don't want to give this old man face? Who do you think you are? You want me to give you face?" Suddenly, the smile on Yi Xian's face disappeared, and he looked at Saint King Tailing with a sinister gaze. Saint King Han Tian said in surprise. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so arrogant and disrespectful to Saint King Tailing. One had to know that Saint King Tailing was a Nine Heavens Saint King. Even he had to respectfully call him senior. Did Yi Xian want to die? At this moment, Saint King Tailing held the cup tightly, and his face turned purple. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes from time to time, but this emotion disappeared quickly as if it had never appeared on Saint King Tailing. Chapter 11:21. Little friend Yi, although I've been cultivating for many years and don't like to fight with others, do you really think I'm easy to bully? Rumble. The law of chaos shattered the void. Saint King Tailing's face turned cold. He slammed his 5 fingers on the table and a terrifying aura burst out from his body. The cultivation of a Nine Heavens Saint King was faintly overflowing. He looked at Yi Xian with hostility. Ha! Looking at the terrifying aura of Saint King Tailing, Yi Xian's mind was indeed trembling slightly. He could feel the terror of a Nine Heavens Saint King, but there was no fear on his face. Instead, he stared at Saint King Tailing with a strange expression. You're right. I think you're easy to bully, and I want to see the cultivation of a Nine Heavens Saint King. Rumble. The void collapsed and the chaos flowed. Yi Xian slowly got up and looked at Saint King Tailing without showing any weakness. However, the strange smile on his face didn't disappear. Senior, you've seen it. This person is extremely arrogant. He doesn't even take you seriously. If you don't kill him, won't it be a disgrace to your name? Saint King Han Tian quickly added fuel to the fire. He couldn't wait for Saint King Tailing to kill Yi Xian on the spot. At this moment, Saint King Tailing's face was filled with anger. However, if one looked closely, they would notice that his lips were trembling slightly. It was just that this detail was very difficult to notice. However, Yi Xian had been observing Saint King Tailing's expression, and this scene happened to fall into his eyes. Perhaps some people would ask, could it be that Yi Xian has gone crazy? He actually angered the great spirit Saint King to such an extent. This was someone 2 realms higher than him. Gamble. In fact, Yi Xian was betting on one thing. He was betting that Saint King Tailing had a problem with himself and wouldn't dare to attack him. He was just bluffing. Yi Xian's suspicion was well-founded. First, Saint King Han Tian would definitely tell Saint King Tailing that he had killed his disciple. Saint King Han Tian wanted to use Saint King Tailing to kill him, but Saint King Tailing didn't mention it. Instead, Saint King Tailing wanted to resolve the conflict between him and Saint King Han Tian. Secondly, since he came to the holy land of Taichu, Saint King Tailing had been very humble and even acted like a senior. Perhaps, in the eyes of outsiders, Tailing Saint King's performance was impeccable. He was really a senior who stood aloof from worldly affairs and wouldn't argue with the younger generation. However, Yi Xian understood a principle very well. Although a true powerhouse would not fuss too much, if someone offended their dignity, they would definitely kill them to protect their reputation. But Yi Xian kept provoking Great Spirit Holy King with his words, and he didn't do anything. He just looked angry, and he even showed the power of a Nine Heavens Holy King. Therefore, Yi Xian was very sure that Saint King Tailing had a problem with himself. It wasn't that he didn't want to kill him to avenge his disciple, nor was he really humble. He just didn't have the ability to attack him. Although this was only Yi Xian's judgment, Yi Xian would soon get the answer. Little friend Yi, as long as you apologize to me, you will still be a guest of the holy land of Taichu, Saint King Tailing said coldly. The power of a Nine Heavens Holy King overflowed. You? Yi Xian smiled strangely. I'd like to see what a 9 heavens holy king can do. Rumble. Yi Xian burst out with chaotic qi. The void here was extremely distorted. He didn't give Saint King Tailing any face at all. Instead, he looked at him with a sneer. Senior Tailing, kill him, Saint King Hun Tian said coldly. For a moment, the atmosphere in the entire Taichu temple dropped to the freezing point. Only Yi Xian and Saint King Tailing were facing each other. However, Saint King Tailing's expression was uncertain. He didn't attack Yi Xian at all. Sigh. Just as Saint King Hun Tian was excitedly waiting for Saint King Tailing to kill Yi Xian, he heard Saint King Tailing sigh. The terrifying aura around him gradually dissipated. What a joke, what a joke. I am a 9 heaven Saint King, yet I want to make things difficult for a mere junior like you. Even if I kill you today, won't I become a laughingstock if news of this spreads? Fine, fine, fine. Saint King Tailing waved his hand repeatedly. He looked dispirited. Little friend Yi, please leave. The holy land of Taichu does not welcome you as a guest. Saint King Tailing sighed again and again. He had already ordered Yi Xian to leave. Senior Tailing, you. Saint King Hun Tian was not stupid. How could he be stupid when he cultivated to the Saint King realm? When Yi Xian's fearlessness and the great spirit Saint King's forbearance and retreat were connected, Saint King Hun Tian's face turned slightly pale. A hint of surprise flashed through his eyes as he looked at Saint King Tailing. Could it be? Could there be something wrong with Saint King Tailing himself? Saint King Hun Tian instantly guessed this terrible thing. His heart trembled to the extreme. When this terrible thought appeared, Saint King Hun Tian's expression was uncertain. A great sense of crisis suddenly rose in his heart. Saint King Hun Tian was very clear about Saint King Tailing's history. Back then, this old man had a fiery temper and would kill without a word. Anyone who offended him didn't have a good ending. Then, he built the holy land of Taichu and dominated the area. Why was he so humble today? Why was he enduring Yi Xian's presumptuous and unreasonable behavior? Something was wrong. There was definitely something wrong with Saint King Tailing himself. Otherwise, he would have attacked Yi Xian long ago. How could he tolerate Yi Xian like this? When Saint King Hun Tian guessed the answer, drops of cold sweat overflowed from his forehead. The great terror between life and death was attacking him. If there was something wrong with Saint King Tailing, then he would have no support. How could Yi Xian let him go? I think the holy land of Taichu is very good. Didn't you just ask me to stay for a few more days? I don't want to leave yet. Yi Xian sneered. After a series of tests, Yi Xian was finally completely sure that the old man in front of him was indeed bluffing. There must be something wrong with Saint King Hun Tian's body. He didn't dare to attack him at all. You. Even though Saint King Tailing was a cunning man, his face became panicked at this moment. He looked at Yi Xian with extreme horror in his eyes. How did you find out? Saint King Tailing finally couldn't pretend anymore. His voice was extremely trembling, and he couldn't understand where he had exposed himself. You are very smart and very cunning. Your performance can be said to be impeccable. But because you are too smart, your performance is too impeccable, and this is your biggest flaw. Yi Xian sneered and continued, a Saint King of the 9 heavens, no matter how humble and generous he is, will not be so generous as to greet the person who killed his disciple with a smile. If you had attacked me directly when you saw me, I, Yi Xian, would have turned around and left without saying a word. What a pity, you will never have this chance again. Yi Xian whispered cruelly. Dividing line, 3rd update, for all the original brothers. Also, damn fatso, let me say something to those brothers who read the pirated version. You can read the pirated version, but you can read it silently. Damn fatso, I won't say anything. After all, some of them are students, and some of them have just entered society. They are poor financially, so it's understandable that they don't have the money to read the original version. Damn fatso, I won't look down on those who read the pirated version. After all, they like to read my books, and this is a kind of support for me. But I look down on those who read the pirated version and come to the last chapter of the original version to point at me in the comments section. Do I owe you? Or am I your father? Who taught you this bad habit? And those who claim that they are the original readers with the label of trainee. This book has more than 1,000 chapters, and my book was only limited to 1 million words once. You tell me that you read the original version? Don't you think it's funny? Saying so much is not because of fatso, I look down on those who read the pirated version. After all, everyone has their own difficulties. If you like fatso's book, you can read the pirated version if you don't have the money. It's just that some of them are shameless, so damn fatso, I have to say a few words. Chapter 11:22. Silence. Extreme silence. The Great Spirit Saint King's expression was as gloomy as water. He wanted to refute, but when he saw Yi Xian's disdainful eyes, he forcefully swallowed his words of rebuttal. What a scheming junior. I've underestimated you, said the Sage King. Saint King Tailing was silent for a dozen breaths. He finally looked up at Yi Xian, but his face was completely dark. He didn't look like a senior anymore. Obviously, this was Saint King Tailing's true face. He didn't need to put on a fake face anymore, so he didn't want to pretend anymore. Senior Tailing, you. Sacred King Hun Tian kept retreating as cold sweat trickled down his face. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Yes, I have a problem. I can't use my cultivation as a 9-heaven Saint King, but you're just a Supreme Saint. I can still use my cultivation as a Supreme Saint. Killing you is as easy as pie, Saint King Tailing said coldly. Keep lying. Do you think I'll believe you? Yi Xian smiled. He was very happy. He looked at Saint King Tailing with a mocking gaze. Boom. Suddenly, Saint King Hun Tian's body emitted a bloody light that soared into the sky. He wanted to escape, but before he could do anything, Yi Xian slapped him, knocking him to the ground. Wah! Saint King Hun Tian was already seriously injured. Now that he was hit by Yi Xian, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was lying on the ground like a dead dog. Dong! 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 Yi Xian slowly walked forward. With every step he took, the entire hall rumbled and shook. The Great Spirit Saint King's brows were tightly knitted together as he looked at Yi Xian with a cold killing intent from time to time. Saint King Tailing clenched his fist and slowly loosened it. He didn't dare to attack Yi Xian in the end because he couldn't bear the price of attacking Yi Xian. Even if he could kill Yi Xian, he would suffer unimaginable disaster. No, no, you can't kill me. Saint King Hun Tian's body cracked. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He was screaming at Yi Xian. The heavens are merciless. The earth is merciless. The earth is merciless. The earth is merciless. There's no one in this world that I, Yi Xian, can't kill. Who do you think you are? Yi Xian stepped on Saint King Hun Tian's head. He kept grinding it. Ah! Holy King Hun Tian roared miserably. His skull was collapsing inch by inch, and traces of blood were flowing out from the top of his head. However, Yi Xian looked down excitedly. His feet exploded with a terrifying force that crushed his head even more, causing Holy King Hun Tian to let out a miserable howl. You can't kill him. He's from the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. If you kill him, you'll bring disaster upon yourself. Saint King Tailing couldn't stand it anymore. He tried to dissuade Yi Xian. It wasn't that the Great Spirit Saint King was merciful, and the death of the Great Spirit Saint King had nothing to do with him. It was just that the great spirit Saint King was a member of the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, and if he was killed by Yi Xian just like that, the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace would definitely vent their anger on him. Not to mention that he's from the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, even if he's from the chaos divine palace, Yi Xian, won't be able to survive if I want to kill him. Yi Xian smiled cruelly at Saint King Tailing. He suddenly raised his foot and stomped on Saint King Hun Tian. No! Stop! Saint King Hun Tian screamed miserably. Saint King Tailing roared angrily. However, in the next moment, Saint King Hun Tian's head was crushed by Yi Xian's foot. Bang! His head exploded and blood gushed out. Saint King Hun Tian was now a headless corpse. His body was still twitching on the ground. Clearly, as a Saint King, he could survive even without his head. His vitality is really strong. Tribulation Transcender Technique. Yi Xian curled his lips. His eyes slightly rotated, and an extremely terrifying black mist covered him. The black mist instantly submerged towards Saint King Hun Tian, and in the next moment, Saint King Hun Tian's flesh and blood melted, turning into a surge of blood energy that merged into Yi Xian's body. What? What is this method? Saint King Tailing was horrified. He took 3 steps back. He looked at Yi Xian devouring Saint King Hun Tian in horror. He could feel that Yi Xian's aura had become stronger again. Devouring other people's cultivation. You can devour other people's cultivation. The great spirit Saint King trembled and roared. His eyes were wide open, as if he had encountered something that made him feel extremely terrified. There were countless secret methods in the chaotic world, and there were many evil and demonic methods. However, there were very few methods that could devour other people's cultivation. Even if there were several kinds of devouring secret methods, the side effects were very great. It was very likely that people would go crazy and die. What frightened Saint King Tailing was that Yi Xian's devouring method did not have any evil or demonic aura. Instead, it gave him a mysterious feeling. This feeling made him extremely shocked. Obviously, it was an extremely powerful secret method. You are from the sky-devouring evil palace? Saint King Tailing's face was pale. He looked at Yi Xian with horror in his eyes. The calamity transcender technique slowly dissipated, and Saint King Hun Tian died without leaving any bones. Yi Xian's figure appeared again and directly put Saint King Hun Tian's cosmos bag into his bag. His face was slightly flushed, and he slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Only then did he look at Saint King Tailing. Sky-devouring evil palace? Yi Xian whispered, then looked at Saint King Tailing curiously and said, "Are you talking about the sky-devouring evil palace that controls the 7th epoch?" You are not from the sky-devouring evil palace? Hearing Yi Xian's words, Saint King Tailing suddenly woke up. From Yi Xian's words, it was obvious that the other party did not know about the sky-devouring evil palace. Of course I am not from the sky-devouring evil palace, and I have no interest in it. Yi Xian smiled coldly. If you are not from the sky-devouring evil palace, why do you have such a terrifying devouring method? Saint King Tailing asked in a trembling voice. What was the sky-devouring evil palace? The sky-devouring evil palace was the orthodoxy that controlled the 7th epoch. It was created by the sky-devouring evil lord, and the sky-devouring evil lord was also the 7th strongest of all time. The legend of primal chaos. When the 7th epoch opened, the sky-devouring evil lord massacred the primal chaos world and devoured the cultivation of countless experts. It was an extremely terrifying era, and it was an era of slaughter. A sea of blood, a mountain of corpses, a world of bones, these words could not describe that dark and terrifying era. The sky-devouring evil lord devoured the cultivation of countless experts and finally stepped into the ranks of the strongest of all time, becoming the most terrifying existence in the 7th epoch. And the orthodoxy created by the sky-devouring evil lord cultivated the method of devouring, which was also known by everyone in the primal chaos world. Therefore, Saint King Tailing suspected that Yi Xian was from the sky-devouring evil palace. Chapter 1123. You don't have the right to know why I know the art of devouring, because you will become a dead man soon. Yi Xian's eyes were sinister, and the corner of his mouth curved into a cruel smile. He strode towards Saint King Tailing, looking at him as if he was looking at prey. After devouring Saint King Hun Tian's cultivation, Yi Xian's cultivation had improved a lot, but he was still a distance away from the Saint King realm. Saint King Tailing in front of him was a real Nine Heaven Saint King. If he devoured his cultivation, Yi Xian was sure that he would be able to step into the Saint King realm. Some people might ask why Yi Xian hadn't stepped into the Saint King realm after devouring Saint King Hun Tian. The reason was simple. Because Yi Xian was going through the mutated chaotic saint test. He was invincible in the Supreme Saint realm because of the mutated chaotic saint test. However, the disadvantage was also obvious. The resources he needed for cultivation were hundreds or thousands of times more than ordinary Supreme Saints, and as his cultivation level continued to increase, the resources he needed for cultivation were even more unimaginable. Let's make a simple analogy. The Supreme Saint realm was like a wooden bucket. An ordinary Supreme Saint could only hold a bucket of water, but Yi Xian could hold a lake. There was no comparison at all. Of course, this was not a disadvantage. Although Yi Xian needed unimaginable cultivation resources, the benefits were obvious. In every realm, Yi Xian was almost invincible. Except for the legendary battle constitution and some mutated battle constitutions, almost no one in the same realm was Yi Xian's opponent. Now, Yi Xian was faced with such a big piece of meat like Saint King Tailing. How could he let it go? A Nine Heaven Saint King. A Nine Heaven Saint King who had problems with his own body. This was the top existence in the Saint King realm. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As long as he devoured Saint King Tailing's cultivation, Yi Xian was sure that he would definitely step into the Saint King realm. You want to devour my cultivation? Rumble. Saint King Tailing erupted with a terrifying power, and an extremely terrifying wave overflowed. He looked at Yi Xian with a cold gaze. Wang! Yi Xian's fiery gaze instantly cooled down. His footsteps paused as well as his brows slightly furrowed. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if there was something wrong with Tailing Saint King, he was not someone Yi Xian could kill just because he wanted to. If he forced Tailing Saint King into a corner, he would most likely end up in mutual destruction. Yi Xian calmed down instantly and suppressed the greed in his heart. Obviously, Tailing Holy King was a tough nut to crack. It was better to take it slow. Of course, Yi Xian had many trump cards, and he had a 50% chance of killing Sage King Tailing. However, the Ninth Heaven Saint King was 2 realms higher than him. Yi Xian didn't understand the Ninth Heaven Saint King's methods, so he didn't want to take this risk. If I don't kill you, am I supposed to keep you to give birth to my children? Although Yi Xian didn't want to fight anymore, he was still threatening Sage King Tailing. If he didn't get something out of him, it wouldn't be his personality. To be honest, Sage King Tailing didn't want to fight Yi Xian because he wasn't confident that he could kill Yi Xian. This was because he could only use the power of a lesser Saint King, and this would damage his origin. This was not the result he wanted. Yi Dao Yu, although there is something wrong with my body, you can't kill me. If you and I really fight, both of us will be injured. Why don't we make a deal? Sage King Tailing lowered his stance and even changed the way he addressed Yi Xian. He was just calling him little friend, but now he was calling him Taoist friend. Oh. What kind of deal? Yi Xian's eyes moved. Taoist friend, have you heard of the Heaven Essence pill? Sage King Tailing lowered his voice and said. Heaven Essence pill? Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He was completely stunned. What was the Heaven Essence pill? The Heaven Essence Pill was a chaos spiritual pill, and it was as famous as the Heaven Mending Pill. Yi Xian had seen the introduction of this pill in the records of the wondrous spell nation. If a great saint took the Heaven Essence Pill, they could directly reach the Saint King realm. It was a spiritual pill that could steal the fortune of heaven and earth. However, this kind of pill was extremely rare, and it was a treasure refined by the Tianyuan kingdom. The Tianyuan kingdom had long been destroyed in the last Yuan Hui, so this kind of pill was extinct. You have the Heaven Essence Pill. Yi Xian came back to his senses and looked at Sage King Tailing with narrowed eyes. He didn't believe that Sage King Tailing would be so kind to give him a Heaven Essence Pill. The Heaven Essence Pill is a chaos spiritual pill. I naturally don't have such a treasure, but I know where to find it. Not only that, there are many other treasures in this place. Sage King Tailing smiled. Oh. Yi Xian's eyes turned. He knew that things wouldn't be so simple, and he was right. He wanted to see what tricks Sage King Tailing had up his sleeves. Looking at the strange smile on Yi Xian's face, Sage King Tailing knew that Yi Xian wasn't a kind person. He was as cunning as he was, so he didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "Fellow Taoist, are you curious about why I have problems with my body? It's actually related to this place. Please listen to me slowly. 30 million years ago, Sage King Tailing was still a great saint king. He found the ruins of the Tianyuan kingdom by chance and entered the Tianyuan kingdom. The Tianyuan kingdom had long been destroyed, but there were still many treasures left. Unfortunately, although the Tianyuan kingdom was destroyed, the seals left behind were extremely scary. Sage King Tailing had to use all his strength to break one seal and obtain a Heaven Essence Pill. It was also because of this Heaven Essence Pill that Sage King Tailing was able to become a 9 Heaven Saint King. Unfortunately, he encountered a disaster in the Tianyuan kingdom. He could only escape from the Tianyuan kingdom in a hurry, and the entrance to the Tianyuan kingdom was sealed again. According to Sage King Tailing's calculations, the entrance would only open once every 30 million years, and it would only open for 100 years each time. It was impossible for him to enter even if he wanted to. After returning to the Taichu Holy Land, Sage King Tailing took the Heaven Essence Pill and began to cultivate. It didn't take long for him to become a 9 Heaven Saint King. But Sage King Tailing was too impatient. He wanted to reach the creation realm the next time the entrance opened, and he wanted to take all the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom for himself. Finally, Sage King Tailing went mad during cultivation and suffered an unimaginable injury. He couldn't use his cultivation as a 9 Heaven Saint King at all. If he used it carelessly, he would be in danger of exploding. There were still 3 years before the Tianyuan kingdom opened. Sage King Tailing naturally didn't want to give up this opportunity because only the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom could heal his injuries. My friend, now you understand why I can't use my cultivation as a 9 Heaven Saint King. Sage King Tailing pretended to sigh. You want to invite me to enter the Tianyuan kingdom with you? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Chapter 1124. You're only half right, Saint King Tailing said. Even if you and I go in together, we might not be able to break through the seals. I've already invited some friends, and they're on their way. Only by working together can we get the treasures of Tianyuan Kingdom. Ha! Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was slightly mocking as he said, why should I believe what you said? What if you want to hurt me? It's up to you whether you believe me or not. This is my biggest secret, but unfortunately, I don't dare to use my cultivation. Otherwise, why would I tell you about this great opportunity? As for whether you want to fight me or take the treasures of Tianyuan Kingdom, it's all up to you, Saint King Tailing said sincerely. Yi Xian only believed half of what Saint King Tailing said. Tianyuan Kingdom did exist, and Saint King Tailing had been there before. However, Yi Xian couldn't tell which was true and which was false. Friend, if you take the Tianyuan pill, you can save tens of millions of years of cultivation time. you can become a Saint King immediately. It's impossible for you to become a Saint King directly from a small Saint King. Are you really not tempted? Saint King Tailing said seriously. Okay, I'll do it. Yi Xian wasn't an indecisive person, especially when it came to cultivation. He had an unimaginable stubbornness. You are indeed straightforward. Sage King Great Spirit laughed, and the murderous atmosphere between the two of them gradually dissipated at this moment. Although I've agreed to go to Tianyuan Kingdom with you, how are we going to split the treasures? If you work with your friends to kill me, won't I be in trouble? Yi Xian said coldly. Don't worry, friend. Including you and me, there are 3 great Saint Kings here. The 5 of us will make a heart demon blood oath before we go to Tianyuan Kingdom. If anyone breaks the oath, they'll die. At this point, Great Spirit Holy King quickly added, as for the distribution of the treasures, how about we wait for the other 3 to arrive before we discuss it? Fine. I don't think you would dare to play any tricks with me. However, if the 3 of them are here to join forces to kill me, then don't blame me, Yi Xian, for destroying your orthodoxy, Yi Xian said coldly. Don't worry, fellow cultivator. How could I, Great Spirit, do something so despicable? Sage King Great Spirit hurriedly promised. Hee hee. Suddenly, Yi Xian smiled warmly and cupped his hands towards the Great Spirit Saint King. His expression changed so quickly that the Great Spirit Saint King was caught off guard. Fellow Taoist Great Spirit, I was being unreasonable just now. Please don't blame me. Actually, I didn't plan to fight you at all. I was just joking with you. Seeing that Yi Xian changed his attitude faster than flipping a book, the Great Spirit Saint King said with a fake smile, Yi Dao Yu is too serious. You and I hit it off at first sight. How could I blame you? There was a knife hidden behind a smile. The 2 of them were evenly matched, but they were both on guard against each other. However, they still had to smile at each other on the surface. What happened next was simple. Yi Xian stayed in the holy land of Taichu and directly went into seclusion. He told the Great Spirit Saint King that he would come out in 2 years. Before entering the Tianyuan Kingdom, Yi Xian naturally needed to cultivate well. He needed to refine the cultivation he had just devoured. After all, there were 3 Supreme Saint Kings other than the Great Spirit Saint King. Yi Xian didn't want to fail miserably. Looking at Yi Xian going into seclusion, the Great Spirit Saint King's smile was still there. It wasn't until Yi Xian disappeared from his sight that his smile gradually disappeared. His entire person was gloomy and terrifying, and a sinister look flashed past his eyes. On the other side. Central Territory, Heaven-Mending Sect. Rumble. Golden light descended from the heavens. The laws of primal chaos, which spanned trillions of kilometers, surged forth. An ancient stone door rumbled open, and a figure dressed in snow-white clothes walked out from within the stone door. Bai, you've reached the Saint King realm. Heaven-Mending Sect Master arrived in an instant. When he saw the Saint King aura on Lu Bai's body, he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. How long had it been? Lu Bai went from a mere small saint to a supreme saint. Not only did he not attract the chaotic divine tribulation, but he also created the strongest supreme saint body. And it wasn't over yet. Lu Bai went from a supreme saint to a Saint King realm directly. This cultivation speed made Heaven-Mending Sect Master extremely excited. He wasn't even this excited when he reached the Immortal realm. This also proved how much Heaven-Mending Sect Master valued Lu Bai. One had to know that Lu Bai had never taken the Heaven-Mending pill, and he didn't use any external items to cultivate. This cultivation speed was unprecedented. The chaotic spirit body is indeed the chaotic spirit body. My Heaven-Mending Sect is going to prosper. Heaven-Mending Sect Master shouted excitedly. His eyes were shining as he looked at Lu Bai, as if he was looking at a chaotic supreme treasure. Have you found the person I'm looking for? Lu Bai didn't show any excitement about reaching the Saint King realm. Instead, he looked at Heaven Mending's sect master with a frown. He agreed to stay in Heaven Mending's sect because Heaven Mending's sect master promised to help him find Yi Xian. Otherwise, he would have left long ago. Heaven Mending's sect master was shocked when he heard Lu Baiyi's words. He quickly took out the jade slip Yi Xian gave him and handed it to Lu Baiyi. Your friend is in the southern Do Great region. He's cultivating very well now. He asked me to bring you a letter. Read it yourself. A letter from Brother Yi. Lu Baiyi was overjoyed. He hurriedly took the jade slip and began to read it. You didn't seem happy when you reached the Saint King realm. It's just a letter. Why are you so excited? Sigh. Heaven Mending sect master muttered and let out a long sigh. However, this scene made him realize how important Yi Xian was in Lu Baiyi's heart. After an incense stick worth of time, Lu Baiyi finally finished reading Yi Xian's letter. However, his brows were tightly knitted together. He then looked at Heaven Mending sect master with an unkind expression. What did you say to him? Lu Baiyi asked coldly. Nothing. This sect master just told him that you are cultivating in peace. Once you reach the grand accomplishment stage, you will definitely go find him. Heaven Mending sect master pretended to be calm. However, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Did he reveal something? Brother Yi is a proud person. He is also an extremely determined and courageous person. Moreover, he and I are good friends. However, in this letter, he only told me to cultivate well. He didn't mention anything about coming to find me. This is the biggest problem, Lu Baiyi said coldly. Sect master, I don't know what you said to Brother Yi, but I am not stupid. You must have mocked him. Am I right? Lu Baiyi said in a deep voice. Heaven Mending sect master's face was gloomy. He didn't want to lie. He nodded and said, yes, this sect master did warn him. However, I didn't mock him because I was telling the truth. He is not from the same world as you. He is just a humble dust in the chaotic world. If you care too much about him, it will only affect you. Lu Baiyi, your future is the strongest of all time. Your future is the chaotic world. You are not a little Yi Xian. He is just an ordinary person. He is not qualified to be your friend, Heaven Mending sect master growled. What is an ordinary person? What is the strongest? Lu Baiyi sneered and said, a speck of dust can fill the sea. A blade of grass can split the sky. So what if Brother Yi is an ordinary person? You can't see his future. How do you know what his future will be like? The creation of a mortal body cannot be reversed. This is the rule of the chaotic world. As a mortal body, he can only cultivate to the 3 realms of creation at most. This is an ironclad fact. Sect Master Butian roared furiously. Looking at the changes of the world, the changes of the 12 periods, the movements of the sea, and the rise of the overlords. Nothing is absolute in this world. How do you know that Brother Yi can't illuminate the heavens and become the strongest of all time? Lu Baiyi argued. Fine, even if it's as you say, he can become an eternal paragon, but you, Lu Baiyi, have a chaotic spirit physique. He will never be able to surpass you because there can only be one eternal paragon per Yuanhui. You have already blocked his path. Bu Tian furiously roared. Ha ha ha. Lu Baiyi laughed wildly, his laughter echoing in the sky. Chaotic spirit body. Strongest of all time. If I, Lu Baiyi, become Brother Ye's stumbling block, then my soul should be scattered between heaven and earth. Because my life was given to me by Brother Yi, I will never stop him from moving forward. Are you crazy? Heaven Mending sect master's expression changed greatly. He shouted angrily at Lu Baiyi. How can you understand what I want? How can you understand the feelings between Brother Yi and me? Lu Baiyi stood with his hands behind his back. He looked up at the bright starry sky. His voice was old and hoarse, and there was an indescribable sadness in it. After a long time, maybe there will be a person who will stand alone at the end of the river of time, looking back at the desolate past. Even if I, Lu Bai, can't accompany him, so what? As long as he is alive, it is enough. Lu Bai whispered. Chapter 1125. You. Bu Tian clenched his fists and looked at Lu Bai in disappointment. His eyes were full of helplessness. I miscalculated. Sect Master Bu Tian was extremely regretful. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect Yi Xian to be so important to Lu Bai that he didn't even place Yi Xian in Lu Bai's eyes. Sect leader, thank you for saving my life, but I don't think I should stay here any longer. However, I, Lu Bai, will remember your kindness in my heart and will definitely repay it in the future. Lu Bai came to his senses and cupped his hands towards the heaven-mending sect leader. Then, he walked towards the horizon with large strides. It was obvious that he wanted to find Yi Xian and wouldn't stay in the heaven-mending sect. Wait! Sect Master Bu Tian was greatly alarmed and hurriedly blocked Lu Bai's path. This was a primal chaos spiritual body, how could he bear to let Lu Bai leave? Sect Master, are you trying to force me to stay? Lu Bai frowned. I wouldn't dare. Bu Tian slowly shook his head and said, but you can't leave here. You should know that if other orthodoxies know that you are a chaotic spirit, they will definitely try to rope you in. If you don't join them, they won't let you live. Lu Bai, you have to remember that although you have the best talent of all time and can become the strongest of all time in the next Yuan Hui, a genius who has not risen is just a genius, not an expert of the chaotic world. You may fall at any time. Sect Master, are you threatening me? Lu Bai said indifferently. I don't care if you threaten me or persuade me. I just want you to understand one thing. You are a chaotic spirit body. If your identity is discovered, not only will it bring you a lot of trouble, even this brother of yours will suffer. Without great power, how can you protect him? Without great power, you are just ants to him. He could tell that no matter what he said, Lu Bai wouldn't listen to him. However, as long as it was related to Yi Xian, Lu Bai would attach great importance to it. Therefore, Sect Master Bu Tian didn't mention anything about the Eternal Strongest or the Primal Chaos Universe. He could only use Yi Xian as an example. Only then would he be able to keep Lu Bai here. As expected. Hearing Sect Master Bu Tian's words, Lu Bai fell silent. This caused Sect Master Bu Tian's eyes to light up. He knew that his persuasion was effective, so he added fuel to the fire. How about this? You can peacefully cultivate in my heaven-mending sect. This old man promises you that I will mobilize the entire heaven-mending sect to protect Yi Xian. No matter who tries to harm him, my heaven-mending sect will definitely not sit idly by. This hesitation appeared on Lu Bai's face. How could he not know that Sect Master Bu Tian had proposed such a condition to make him stay? But Lu Bai knew that he could not refuse, because as Master Bu Tian said, he and Yi Xian were too weak in the chaotic world. He was not worried about himself, but he was worried about Yi Xian's safety. All right, I promise you. Lu Bai nodded slowly. Sect Master Bu Tian spat out a mouthful of turbid air. His heart finally calmed down. He had finally managed to keep Lu Bai here. Perhaps some people would ask why Sect Master Bu Tian, who was in the immortal realm and an overlord in the entire chaotic world, begged Lu Bai so humbly. Actually, the reason was very simple. Everything was for the sake of the heaven-mending sect. Everything was for the sake of the heaven-mending sect. Everything was for the sake of the heaven-mending sect, so that it could truly transcend the other sects and exist eternally in the chaotic world. Sect Master Bu Tian could easily kill Lu Bai. After all, a genius who had not risen up was just a genius. If he died, he would die, and everything would be for naught. But sect master Butian could not kill Lu Bai, let alone threaten him. Because if he killed Lu Bai, the heaven-mending sect would never have the chance to control a Yuan Hui. It would only be reduced to a small orthodoxy. How could it face the competition of the other sects? In the competition of the Great Tao, if one did not advance, one would fall behind. There were no eternal sects, only eternal powerhouses. This was the unchanging truth of the chaotic world. Right now, it was the 10th Yuan Hui. The Lord of all spirits was leading the all spirits heavenly palace to control this Yuan Hui. All orthodoxies had to obey his orders, including the heaven-mending sect. And only the orthodoxies created by the 9 eternal powerhouses could disobey the orders of the all spirits heavenly palace. These 9 orthodoxies had transcended and existed eternally in the chaotic world. Therefore, sect master Butian had to keep Lu Bai and tie him to the heaven-mending sect. Only in this way could the heaven-mending sect become the 11th orthodoxy in the next Yuan Hui. It could stand on equal footing with the other 10 orthodoxies and exist eternally in the chaotic world. If Lu Bai died, the heaven-mending sect would no longer have this chance. Therefore, sect master Butian could not give up on Lu Bai no matter what. To put it bluntly, sect master Butian would rather die than let Lu Bai die. This was because Lu Bai was the last hope of the heaven-mending sect. Not only sect master Butian, but also the other orthodoxies. Every orthodoxy was cultivating one or a few disciples who could compete for the 11th Yuan Hui. This was so that when the 11th Yuan Hui began, the people in their orthodoxy could rise to the top. The disciples cultivated by these orthodoxies were extremely terrifying. They all had extremely frightening battle constitutions. Some were even born with the strongest physique. Rumor had it that the strongest seed cultivated by a certain orthodoxy could go against the 9 heaven saint kings in the great saint realm and even killed them in the chaotic universe. This was a jump of 2 realms. His terrifying battle prowess and aptitude shocked the 5 regions of chaos. There were even more terrifying candidates who crossed the chaotic universe to hunt down the giant star beasts. They fought countless giant star beasts alone until they killed a giant star beast king in the chaotic universe. The chaotic world had no lack of shocking geniuses. However, each Yuan Hui could only produce one supreme expert. In order to become a supreme expert, one had to step on the corpses of these geniuses to advance. Unfortunately, most of them had become corpses on the path of supreme experts. In the end, they vanished in the waves of time and were unable to cause the slightest ripple. Even if they were the most dazzling and resplendent stars when they were alive, they could only fall and perish in the end. The 10th Yuan Hui had just begun 300 million years ago. The Lord of all spirits had only been in charge of the 10th Yuan Hui for 100 million years. However, the orthodoxies had already begun to prepare for the 11th Yuan Hui. This was because when the 11th Yuan Hui began, it would be an unimaginably dark age. It would be a bloody struggle for supremacy. Before meeting Lu Bai, sect master Butian was burning with anxiety because he could not find a candidate with the potential to become a supreme expert. When he met Lu Bai, sect master Butian knew that the heavens had eyes and gave the heaven-mending sect the greatest hope. How could he give up on Lu Bai? Chapter 1126. Why did sect master Butian keep urging Lu Bai to cultivate? This was because he started too late, a full 100 million years later. The disciples from the other great powers were already at the creation, and transformation stages. There were even some devilish geniuses who were trying to break through to the yin and yang stages. How could Butian not be anxious? Fortunately, Lu Bai's cultivation speed shocked him. He also felt the terrifying cultivation speed of the chaotic spirit body. However, sect master Butian also knew that even though the chaotic spirit body was the #1 talent in all of history, it was harder to improve as one progressed. Although Lu Bai didn't encounter any calamities and could cultivate without any hindrance, he still needed time to settle down. Therefore, Sect Master Butian had no other choice but to use Yi Xian to encourage Lu Bai to calm down and cultivate. Sect Master, although I promised you to stay in Butian's sect, I hope you don't forget your promise. I don't want Brother Yi to be in any danger. Lu Bai said in a deep voice. Don't worry, as long as Yi Xian doesn't offend the 10 great orthodoxies, our Butian sect will be able to deal with him. Sect Master Butian hurriedly promised. The next thing was simple. Lu Bai stayed in Butian's sect and went into seclusion again because he wanted to break through to the Great Saint King realm, the 9 Heavens Saint King realm, and then the Creation realm. He had to find Yi Xian. Lu Bai set a goal for himself, the Creation realm. As long as he stepped into the Creation realm, he would be able to truly walk through the 5 regions of chaos. At that time, it would also be the time for him to meet Yi Xian. Rumble. The ancient stone door closed with a rumble. Lu Bai went into seclusion again. Only when Lu Bai disappeared from Sect Master Butian's sight did Sect Master Butian let out a sigh of relief. Lu Bai, oh Lu Bai, when will you understand my good intentions? Sect Master Butian sighed deeply. Southern Dou region, Holy Land of Taichu. Bang! The stone door to seclusion shattered with a loud bang. Yi Xian slowly walked out of the stone door. 2 years of closed-door cultivation was only a blink of an eye for Yi Xian. In the past 2 years, he had mainly refined the blood-soul essence of Saint King Hun Tian and the other great sages, and used the vast amount of spirit stones in their Qiankuan bags for cultivation. However, it was also during these 2 years of closed-door cultivation that Yi Xian discovered an extremely troublesome matter. He had underestimated the cultivation resources he needed. His body was like a terrifying bottomless pit. He had devoured the blood, soul, and essence energy of several great saints, as well as Saint King Hun Tian's cultivation. There were also several million chaos spirit stones in their spatial pouches. Yi Xian swallowed them all in one go. Under the terrifying effect of the Calamity Transcender technique, Yi Xian finally came out of seclusion 2 years later. However, his cultivation had only increased by a small amount, and he was still some distance away from the Saint King realm. Yi Xian was extremely sure that if it were an ordinary great saint, he would have already stepped into the Saint King realm, and even Great Saint King would not be a problem. However, his cultivation progress was extremely slow. However, Yi Xian was not disappointed at all. Instead, he was secretly delighted because he could feel that his body was like a vast ocean, surging with surging power. This power was hidden all over his body, constantly nourishing his physical body and saint soul. Everything was developing in a good direction. Yi Xian was also extremely certain that the reason he was able to resist the Saint King's world in the Great Sage realm and kill the Saint King Hun Tian in one fell swoop was because he had passed through the mutated primal chaos holy tribulation and created a perfect Great Sage body. A towering platform was built on the ground. Only with a solid foundation could a towering tree grow and truly stand tall in the wind and rain without falling. Yi Xian had a feeling that although he was still in the Great Saint realm, he would not be weak even if he faced the so-called Great Saint King. If he used some of his trump cards, it would not be impossible for him to kill a Great Saint King. Yi Daoyu, we've been waiting for you for a long time. Please come inside the palace to talk. Suddenly, Saint King Tailing's voice sounded in Yi Xian's ears. This also made Yi Xian's thoughts turn. His eyes moved slightly, and he walked toward the Taichu Palace. Taichu Palace. Saint King Tailing sat high up in the main seat. 3 people were sitting on his right. They were 2 men and 1 woman. At this moment, they were chatting with Saint King Tailing. When Yi Xian entered, the 3 of them stopped talking and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Daoyu, let me introduce you. As Yi Xian arrived, Saint King Tailing stood up with a smile and began to introduce the 3 people to Yi Xian. This is Saint King Daoyun. This is Crone 9 Ways. This is Saint King Yinhai. There were 3 men and 1 woman. Saint King Daoyun's expression was cold. He only glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. A trace of disdain flashed across his eyes. Saint King Yinhai smiled and bowed to Yi Xian. I am Yinhai. Greetings, Yi Daoyu. Oh, what a handsome young man. Crone Nine Ways was graceful. She wore a red dress and looked to be around 20 years old. She gave off a mature and charming charm. She was covering her mouth and teasing Yi Xian. Of course, the so-called appearance did not represent one's true age. These three had lived for a very long time and could be considered as three old monsters. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Yi Xian smiled as he spoke. He cupped his hands and greeted the three of them. Fellow Taoists? Humph. Amir Jr. dares to call us fellow Taoists. Suddenly, Saint King Daoyun sneered and looked at Saint King Tailing with dissatisfaction. Brother Tailing, you and I have known each other for many years. You let Amir Jr. explore Tianyuan Kingdom with us and even want to split the treasures of Tianyuan Kingdom with him. Shouldn't you give us an explanation? Obviously, the three of them could tell that Yi Xian was only a supreme saint when he came here. They were all supreme saint kings, so naturally, they looked down on Yi Xian. Crone Nine Ways and Saint King Yinhai did not show it, but Saint King Daoyun would not pretend to be polite, so he questioned Saint King Tailing. Brother Daoyun, don't underestimate Yi Daoyu. Although he's only a supreme saint, his battle power is no weaker than ours. Saint King Hun Tian died at Yi Daoyu's hands, Saint King Tailing said. Hun Tian died? The three of them were stunned as they looked at Yi Xian in surprise. Only then did they realize that even though Yi Xian was a great sage, his eyes were extremely calm as he looked at the three of them. He didn't show any signs of nervousness. Humph, he killed someone from 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, so he can't go to Tianyuan Kingdom with us. Besides, a supreme saint is only a supreme saint. So what if he killed Saint King Hun Tian? Hun Tian just became a saint king. How can he compare to us? Saint King Daoyun frowned. Ah. Saint King Tailing pretended to be troubled and looked at Yi Xian. Clearly, he was telling Yi Xian that whether or not he could get the three's approval depended on Yi Xian's ability. You talk a lot, but you're not very capable, Yi Xian said indifferently. Are you talking to me? Saint King Daoyun's face turned cold. He looked back at Yi Xian with murderous intent in his eyes. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.